across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's just coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or listening on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, watching on your connected device, it is great to have your company. Delighted to be here with you today. It's sort of a pretty nice sunny spring day. We should be feeling, well, all the joys of spring. The clocks have changed. Lovely, long, sunny, warm evenings. What's not like? Well, kind of terrible Tuesday, and essential household bills rising today in what has been dubbed awful April as well. Water bills, energy bills, council tax, all going up. Your TV licence, you name it, car tax, all going up. Although, if you're on minimum wage, your minimum wage is increasing. Your living wage is increasing as well. Trouble is, that's probably going to be offset by those national insurance rises for employers, which means that, you're probably not going to see any other rises coming anytime soon. So I'd love to hear your reaction to that, because this is where stuff really does kick in. Those few £100 are the enough amount that just tips people over the limit. That's the, if people on better incomes, the extra spending money you might have had to maybe book a holiday, maybe go out to a restaurant, but actually that money is now gone. That's money that's not going to be put into the economy. That's going to impact lots and lots of other people in their jobs as well. Are we on a downward spiral towards recession? Are we going to ever see the growth we've heard so much about? Inflation still going up, likely not to hit that Bank of England 2% target, and before 2027 at the earliest. I'd love to hear your reaction. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. And of course, we've got Trump tariffs kicking in. May not affect the job that you have, but there's going to be an impact on the world economy that it will end up impacting all of us. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Plus, we're going to be talking about the new T-tier justice row. It's erupted after police were told to treat black and white suspects differently. A report by policing chiefs, we discussed this last week, but it was raised in the House of Commons yesterday, stated that officers must now consider cultural impact and community trauma when using their powers. This extraordinary comes after the Sentencing Council climbed down at the very last minute, because it was due to come in today, the introduction of new two-tier justice rules after the government threatened legislation to block the guidance. That legislation is going to go forward. But by the way, everyone at the Sentencing Council that basically said, you should treat people from ethnic, cultural, religious minorities, I don't know what a cultural minority is either, should be treated differently. Every single person on the Sentencing Council who approved that should lose their job. Should they not? We'll talk about that. Plus, Marine Le Pen criticised a court ruling last night that bans her from running for the French presidency in 2027. She said it was a political decision, so she will appeal. But that ban stays while she appeals. Could be a couple of years. The French hard-right politician was found guilty of embezzling EU funds. She was barred for 5 years from standing in an election. Also, we're going to be talking, about Donald Trump's new tariff wars. It looks like they are going to be hitting the UK, among many other countries. And apparently the US are saying that there's no free trade without free speech. They're concerned about a free speech row involving an anti-abortion campaigner here in the UK. Very interesting stuff coming up. All of that, as I say, coming up, and all of it coming up with the chat from, I'm delighted to say once again here at the show, journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth. Welcome back to the show.
Good morning, Julia.
Always good to see you. What do you make of all these price rises? Just to go through them all, I won't go through all the percentages, but is in most of them, water bills going up by a lot more, but most of it seems to be about sort of 4, 6, 7% or something like that. But realistically, inflation is supposed to be lower than that. So, it's probably going up more than your wages were going up. So we're talking about your gas, electricity. Even a small increase in that is a lot of money, because they're around, the £2,000 mark, aren't they? Yeah. Your broadband, your mobile phone, your TV licence going up, your car tax, your water bills, they're going up by the most. Stealth taxes, whereby you're getting dragged into a higher rate of tax than you would have been, not basic rate to higher rate, others. So your marginal income, even if you're on quite average wages, you could be paying the higher rate of tax. Bearing in mind, average wage in this country is 38k. On 50k, anything after that, you're going to be paying the 40% rate. That tax was not supposed to be for people on that sort of income. Stamp duty if you're trying to buy or sell a home, your council tax, you name it. bills are going up. Who do you blame?
Well, I think there are private companies when it comes to the utilities that have taken advantage in recent years. You talked about the water bills. They're going up 26%, which is an extraordinary amount. But look at the profits.
On average, some of them are going up a lot more, yeah.
But the profits have gone up 82% since 2018-19.
Yeah.
Now, you know, you don't have to be an economist to figure out that they're taking the mick there. And it's all while the service has got poorer, water has got dirtier.
They've not done all the work they were supposed to have done.
And we've not built a reservoir since the early 90s.
And also, they've been paying out to shareholders, bonuses to chief executives and directors. Many of these are people who, in foreign companies that own our water companies. I've always found the whole water company privatisation utterly bizarre. I don't have a choice of provider. I live in the London area. I think a fifth of the UK has Thames Water as their provider, or certainly a fifth of England. No, that's it. You know, I've got Thames Water providing my water. I can't go, well, I'm going to go to, you know, Yorkshire Water to get my... That's not an option.
I would definitely choose Yorkshire Water, just like my tea. But, you know, this is the thing. Back in 2008, there was this big question of were the banks too big to fail. With our utilities, it feels like the argument is they're too essential to fail, when actually I think a bit more of the market that they claimed to have when they were privatised might do it the world of good, because they continue to provide a poor service and put up costs, and yet there are so few consequences.
Yep.
I know that the regulator for when there are leaks and pipes explode or the water is dirty, it didn't issue a single fine for a whole 12 months, because what they would do is they would mediate, and so they'd deal with something far less than the fine. So even the regulator doesn't get them.
I think we could all agree. That they've not done a good job, neither the regulator nor the water companies. But the bills are going up, and people are going to have to pay them out something. Now, if you're on minimum wage, if you're on living wage, which is, you know, not a legal requirement, but a wage that is more likely to help pay your bills, you're seeing your wages going up. And I know a number of teenagers very happy about that, with their weekend jobs getting the full pay, a minimum wage going up. However, there is also concern. As of, I think it's Sunday, April the 6th, the new tax year, national insurance for employers, not only is the threshold at which they start paying national insurance going down to £5,000, a massive extra load of staff, particularly on lower pay, going to have that. Also, the rate going up to, I mean, for bigger employers, it's 15% national insurance rate. These are huge sums of money. An awful lot of companies say, look, we're either not going to hire new people, we're going to lay people off, we're not going to give people wage rises. Even though left-wing think tanks like, you know, the Resolution Foundation are saying, and Institute of Fiscal Studies and others, that it's the poorest people who get hit the hardest when you know, companies cut back, and they are cutting back. Now, we were promised, you know, you were very supportive of this government getting in. They were promising growth. It's their number one priority. We ain't seen any growth. If anything, we are looking like we're heading towards recession. Even if you ignore everything that's going on with tariffs and Trump and all of that, Ukraine war, just in terms of what is going on in this country, what the government is completely in charge of. We're literally doing the opposite of what we should be doing to try and help this country get back on its feet. I
mean, well, there are positive things in the figures, which is...
Hey, everyone, tune in.
Well, the liberalisation of the ability to build houses is expected to add many billions, but that takes 5 to 10 years. And then there is the fact that I think that this government, one of the reasons they were elected was because people wanted their public services to be fixed. They've been a complete state, the NHS being the most obvious.
And they wanted someone else to pay taxes to cover it.
Well, they wanted them to be fixed, and so Labour raised the money to fix it. I think when it comes to the NHS, 7 million people on a backlog, many of those people are why we have such an unemployment rate, such an out-of-work rate, because people can't do their jobs. And so you have to have a big upfront payment to fix things like the NHS. It's like the potholes. We keep paving them over instead of putting new roads down. Yeah. That's the attitude to the country.
I think to fix a lot of things, there would be an upfront cost. I accept that. I don't see any evidence that any of that is happening.
But that's also why the growth figures have been raised for the end of this Parliament compared to what they were, because they think it will pay off.
I hate to tell you, the growth figures haven't been raised. The forecasts have always been wrong. For all economists accept that all forecasts are all wrong. So I don't think we can trust on this. I really, really don't. But anyway, I want to hear your thoughts. Tell me how it's affecting you. I mean, it's very interesting, actually. And again, this is this is always where this comes out. Like, single mum, single parents are the ones who are hit the hardest. And then they use an example of a woman who's working part-time when her youngest child is 5 years old, so in full-time school. I'm sorry. Every mum I knew had a 5-year-old, whether they were single or in a couple, worked full-time when they by the time their kids were at school. I really don't understand what's... I've got family members, very good friends who are single parents, in jobs like nursing or other jobs, and they've managed to work full-time. So when you're saying, oh, I'm going to be really hit by these bills, poor me, because I'm a single mum. Well, A, why is Dad? Why isn't he paying? I'm sorry, where is Dad? Let's always go, why isn't Dad paying for his kid? And second, go and get a full-time job, like everyone else does. Sorry, is it just me? You don't have the privilege. I want to pick my kid up from school. Well, lovely. Well, then, should have married better then, is what I would say to most women.
I actually think that one of the problems we have is that people aren't spending enough time raising their kids. I think that better relationships with kids, more time with them, would do us the world of good.
Yeah, but you can't spend time with them when they're at school.
OK, fair enough.
Between about 8:30 and 3:30, I'm pretty sure you're able to go and get a job.
But most people don't have
Maybe
a job.
Maybe a kid could go into a club after school for an hour, and you can probably manage to do a full-time job.
I was going to say that undermines your point, because if they're at work between those hours, it's probably can only be a part-time job.
Except the fact that most mums who do actually pick up their kids from school manage to work.
Well, I mean...
Except, yeah. I'm just talking about facts, Benjamin. I know you on the left don't like those, but I'm just saying.
I had 3 parents. I had my grandparents too, so
yeah.
So we never had that problem.
No, OK. Right, well, look, let's also talk about this latest on two-tier justice. So we had... Two-tier justice in terms of sentencing. The Sentencing Council basically being overruled effectively by the government, saying they were going to bring in legislation. We're going to stop you having basically 2-tier guidelines for whether or not you get a pre-sentencing report, which is largely used to provide mitigating factors, i.e. a way of softening the sentence. But it was particularly for ethnic, religious, and I don't know what these are, community minorities, and also people who claim to be trans. Awful lot of men who are sex offenders suddenly miraculously discover that actually they're women. Isn't that funny? Just complete coincidence. It must be the shock of the system. It's a shock of going into that police cell that makes them realise this. But they basically were threatened by Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, and again, she and the previous Justice Secretary, now Robert Jenrick, now he's Shadow Justice Secretary. Everyone's claiming, they didn't know anything about this. I mean, even though their advisors were in the meetings. Yeah. Sentencing Council, still all those judges and senior figures, all quite happily still in their jobs, despite the fact they were basically pushing in my view, blatantly, openly racist, illegal sentencing guidelines. We also now know we've got 2-tier police race guidelines. Now, we did actually learn about these last week, but they're raised in the Commons yesterday, and this is basically officers being told to treat black and white suspects differently. Labour has all said there's nothing in the plan suggesting police should give preferential treatment to black people compared to white people, but the report basically said their commitment is to racial equity, and they said that did not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. They called for equality of policing outcomes for different ethnic groups by ending the racial disparity in the, quote, likelihood of people being criminalised. And they want officers to consider cultural impact and community trauma when using their powers. What the heck is that?
Well, I think there is a lot of evidence that black people are disproportionately arrested or questioned by police. Yeah, of course there is. We know that the chances of being arrested for being in possession of cannabis are 6 times higher for black people compared with white people. Now, that's got something to do with the choices police are making when they arrest them.
Is it not also come to do with the demographics of where the police are patrolling, and black people, largely Afro-Caribbean people, are more likely to be living in the cities where police are more likely to be dealing with drug problems? So, funnily enough, they're not patrolling the streets of a village in Dorset where it's likely to be more white people. If you look to the demographics of the people who live in those inner city areas, I think those figures will be very, very different in terms of a comparison.
I think there's a lot of distrust from black communities, especially in places like London, and to take that into perspective of how you police is important, because actually, in the nature of policing that we have in this country, policing by consent, a lot of information comes from the community providing it to the police.
Well, they often don't provide it to
And if
police.
that breaks down, then policing is inefficient.
No doubt at all. Absolutely no doubt at all. We have got some racist police officers, we've had issues, and certainly in the past. I like to think things are getting better. It will never be perfect. I accept that. If I were a young black man living in an inner city right now, do you know who I'd most distrust? Another young black man, because they're the person who are most at risk to me in terms of my chances of being beaten up, being stabbed, being mugged, being robbed, or anything else.
A friend of mine who used to be a Metropolitan Police officer told me a story of how his boss once told them to go and check some people in a car because saying they could smell cannabis, and he knew full well they couldn't smell cannabis. It was a car full of black people, and they just
using it as an excuse.
They were. They wanted to really reach their arrest targets, and they knew that was the easiest way to do it. And he was horrified. I was shocked, but you know, when you think
outrageous.
about it, should it be shocking?
And they should be sacked. The officers should be sacked who ordered that, if that was the case.
You know, I've read stories in the news where a barrister, a black barrister who drives a very nice BMW, told of how he was repeatedly stopped in his car, and of course the police officers would get the shock of their lives because he knows the law so well, but they're not doing that to a white person.
No,
in a nice
I'm
BMW.
fully aware. I'm a white middle-class woman. I've never been stopped by the police driving a Tiguan. I don't think I look like a drug dealer. And again, and the idea that if a young black man or an older black man is driving a fancy car, they must be up to something. That is racism through and through, 100%. However, when we look at the two-tier justice and all the talk we've had on the sentencing guidelines, for instance, about black people are less likely are more likely to have longer sentences, not more likely to be sentenced to prison, but more likely to get longer sentences. And one of the reasons for that is because they're less likely to plead guilty at any point or early enough than other groups. Therefore, you get a longer sentence. And also, when people say for the same crimes, often when you're comparing the actual figures, there are only 12 different categories. They'll include, assault on the person. Now, that will include a vast array of different crimes, from someone sort of slapping someone to someone stabbing somebody or beating them up, and so you cannot make a direct comparison. When we look at the violence, when you look at the statistics, you look at in many areas, and you look at who is getting hurt and who is perpetrating the crimes. I'm afraid particularly the Afro-Caribbean community, certainly in London, is vastly overrepresented in certain categories of crime. And those are categories of crime that most people, black and white, are concerned about and want dealt harshly. And so they're dealing out these crimes. If you want to know the group, by the way, the ethnic group that is most likely to get the tougher sentences, Chinese.
Really?
Yeah,
I don't think Chinese are being criminals.
I look at the actual statistics and read the actual reports even by the woke sort of anti-prison campaign groups. If you actually look at the official statistics, Chinese and others, and it's like, oh, OK, but what crimes are they committing?
Yeah, I wonder whether that's because there are so few criminals and maybe it tends to be a certain extremity of crime.
Well, because there's always an excuse when it's not. We always have to focus on it being black people. But the key thing is everyone should be treated equally. And when people talk about equity, what they mean is having the same outcome. But you shouldn't have the same outcome if people have done different things.
But you should have it's about, when it talk about outcome, it means in terms of the way that they deal with the police, that it is equal. But I think it would be complete. I think it's right that the police thinks about the fact of how they treat different racial groups, because clearly there's a problem at the moment. But when it comes to the sentencing, I think the Justice Secretary is totally right. And she wrote a letter to the Sentencing Council last week saying, look, I'm a Muslim woman and this is not OK. I don't want to be treated differently to my white colleagues.
Can I point out, though, I'm not a Muslim woman. I'm a white, straight woman. I mean, I only get one category there, which is... No, but what you are shouldn't have any bearing on whether your opinion matters more or how you're treated. You should be treated... I mean, someone growing up, with a drug addict father who's in and out of jail who sort of told you to go and carry the drugs. That's a relevant factor, but it's got sod all to do with whether or not you're black or white or brown.
Well, as the child of a drug dealer father
exactly.
and a drug dealer mother, I tell you what, I never committed a crime. I worked harder and went to school. But,
and good for you.
The reason that's possible is when people have role models, and maybe some of the part in African background, in Caribbean background, is black Caribbean is a particularly problematic background. There's lots of crime rates. Maybe they need good role models and better schools.
Dads.
Yes.
Dads, that's what they need. 45% of children growing up in Afro-Caribbean homes, dad isn't in their home. In families from African heritage, not the same issue. Don't have any of the same crime rates. There's, if you look at the different crime rates between different communities, most of it goes down to family unit. actually. It's extraordinary. It's far more to do with family, demographics, than it is to do with anything to do with race. Anyway, I want to we're way over time, but I desperately want to, love to hear your thoughts on all of this, by the way. Of course, get in touch, 0344 499 1000. I just want to get to Marine Le Pen. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but just briefly, Marine Le Pen banned from standing in the next French presidential election. That's 2027. She was going to go for a fourth attempt. She's odds-on favourite. Each time she's got more and more votes. We don't know who she'd be running against. It won't be Emmanuel Macron. But her party is the biggest single party national rally in France in the parliamentary elections. She was basically convicted of embezzlement of EU funds. We're not talking about going off and buying designer handbags. We're talking about using the funds from the EU to fund her party. Not allowed, no question, not allowed, funding her party back in France. However, everyone I've spoken to who worked in the EU said everyone does this. They've chosen to prosecute her. She's been banned from standing elections. We had Mike Amesbury, the Labour MP, convicted on camera, by the way, of repeatedly punching a constituent to the ground, repeatedly punching him in the face to the extent that people had to pull him off because that man could have died. He resigned from his seat. There is going to be a by-election. He's allowed to stand. Now, the Labour Party don't want him to stand. He has every right to stand as an independent. How can somebody be banned from running in an election just because of a criminal conviction? Surely that should be something that should be up to the general public, up to the voters.
Well, to quote Donald Trump, lock her up. I think that's what I think of this. I mean, look, there is a difference here, though, which is, and that's not to defend Mike Amesbury, but to say that if your crime is about exploiting the political system, then should the political system not have consequences? And she was taking money, public money, from the EU Parliament, from part of the political system, and funneling it to fuel her own staff. And also, it's questionable about whether she benefited or the Le Pen family benefited, because some of the Le Pen family were being paid with this money.
But for jobs.
Yes, but
they weren't like getting it in their personal bank account. It was like, here you go.
Well, they were getting it in their personal bank account through a job.
Through pay.
And the party, the National Rally, was in, I think, £15 million equivalent of debt. So it couldn't afford its costs at the time it was doing this. So it's highly dubious. And many Le Pen family members probably wouldn't have had jobs.
It's a legitimate prosecution. However, they don't prosecute us. And when you talk about, you say Christine Lagarde, OK, she's, boss of the IMF. She's a French finance minister. She, in 2016, was found guilty of negligence over public funds that went to a private company. She was found guilty of that. Wasn't even handed a punishment of any sort whatsoever. Oh, no, reaffirmed as the boss of the IMF. French government said they've got every faith in her. Why are the rules so different? And why are so many people so upset about what happened to the Romanian opposition leader? Because when he's banned from standing. When everyone's upset about what's happened in Turkey. Oh, but it's Marine Le Pen. There's so obviously a political bias, dimension to this. I think, though, this is going to help her party. I think there'll be a lot of people who say, we've seen the socialist leaders and others, people on the far left saying, this is such an outrage that they are horrified by it.
Well, let's just be clear, though. She was using public money illegally to fund
she got a criminal conviction.
To fund her attempt to be the French president. That, for me, is directly affecting how she was the chance of her becoming president, and therefore
Shouldn't that be up to the voters?
The most appropriate punishment should be that you cannot be the French president
the most appropriate
so long as you're illegally using that money.
If it's a jail sentence or if it's a fine or whatever it is, being tagged, that's fine. That's the sentence. That's the sentence. She's going to appeal. But banning her from running for public office, everyone should be allowed to run for public office. That's part of democracy.
But it's like in the Romanian case where he was found to have, I think the accusation was Russian interference to help him in the popularity to try and win that election. If you are trying to skew the grounds on which an election is functioning, then you should have a consequence with that election. That's the difference in Le Pen and her money.
Well, you do have a consequence. If the voters don't like you because of that, then they won't vote for you.
Right, but I mean, I hate to go straight to Hitler, but if you push propaganda out to distort how people can read the situation, then the voters don't have. The whole point is that the voters aren't getting
so you just ban
fair
people.
Instruction.
Do you think these bans? Do you think they work well?
We have it in this country. If you're declared bankrupt, you're banned from running for election.
You are, actually. That's a good point. I think until you redeem the bankruptcy, aren't you?
I don't know, but the MP for Windsor, I think, was banned because his business had gone under, which is totally ridiculous in my opinion. I think that, there's good grounds for it, which is that they fear that, you might be at risk of exploitation with your finances. I don't think we should have that law, but it's still in the case. You can be banned in this country.
Okay, fair point. 10:26 at the time. Love to hear your thoughts on this. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 0344 499 1000. Up next, going to take your calls coming in thick and fast. podcast about terrible Tuesday, awful April, and all your bills going up. Who do you blame? What's your reaction? And how are you going to cope? This is Talk.
Like about 3 months ago, when the Home Office were sort of letting it be known that they think they had smashed the correlation between the weather and crossings. So it meant that actually the crossings were just down generally. The French continue to take the mick, as we've been reporting heavily.
£500 million
Heavily in
the
sun over the last few days, the last week or so. You know, they're literally sort of, you know, they're counting people onto the boats, and when the boats get full enough, the police basically wave off the boat and say, "Don't worry, you'll be in England."
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benjamin Butterworth still with me. And now let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000. Pat is on the line in London. And Pat, you want to talk about the bills going up today?
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, it's as your guest said, they've got to raise money to give it to the NHS. If you raised enough money to put in a nuclear-powered American aircraft carrier, it wouldn't be enough. If you raised 500 billion trillion, which I don't think there's that much money on the planet, and you put it into the NHS, it wouldn't be enough because it's wastage.
Yep.
They buy kit that's overpriced. The people who, like the managers, the middle managers, not the doctors and the nurses.
But wait a minute, but you're talking about taxes. Now, your council tax doesn't go on the NHS. We're talking about gas, electricity bills, water bills, TV licence, broadband, mobile phones. Those aren't taxes. Those are price rises.
Yeah, but what it is, they're not paying for better services. They're paying their wages.
Yeah.
It all goes on wages instead of better services. If you made, it's like the water board or the if you made them people get reasonable amounts of cash for their what they do, and put the rest of it into services, it wouldn't be like it. It's the fact that they're basically we're their employers.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. That's a fair point. And a lot of employers basically say, we have to put prices up. We see shrinkflation. There was a article last week about Easter eggs going up in price because we had a lower cocoa harvest, but They basically shrunk everything and then put the price up as well, and we're paying more for that because it's costing them more and they've got to pass it on to us. And then, of course, we ask for wage rises and they have to pay that, and then the national insurance, and it's all a spiral. Are you worried about the direction we're heading in?
Oh, of course. I mean, you know, I don't work no more. I'm sort of a new pensioner, about 3 years.
Congrats. But,
you know, the point is, you still have to have a budget, and that's the trouble with these people who put the bills, the electric, the gas. They don't have budgets. They're working on other people's money. They're like con men. They're working on other people's money.
It doesn't focus the mind so much, does it? I really appreciate your call, Pat. Thank you very much indeed. Herbie's on the line in Harrow. Hello, Herbie.
Good morning,
Good morning. What do you want to say?
Welcome to Rip Off Britain and Out of Control. Dear, oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. Whatever next. I mean to say, they're mismanaged. Not only do the Conservatives, but the Labour government are also mismanaging this country yet again. We are the ones that pick up the tab every time they do something wrong. It's not their money. They don't care. They're not accountable to it, so they can get away with it.
Yeah.
You know, we would never be able to get away with it. And I think that the way it's out of control. You see, I've said when I campaigned back in 2008, when I hung upside down in Trafalgar Square about money hemorrhaging from my pocket, it's doing exactly the same now. Your wages and your pensions go up by the rate of inflation, but everything else goes through the roof. Thank you very much. We can take what we like.
Yeah, and there is that thing. I remember the whole way through the last few years when they were talking about inflation, even when it hit, was it 11.1%? And I'm going to the supermarket till going, this ain't gone up by 11%. This has gone up by so much more than that. The electric, all of the key bills that you couldn't avoid, they were all going up by a lot more. And we're still living with the consequences of that.
Well, we are, Julie. I mean to say, this government, they've just been given a pay rise. You know, not being said too much about that.
That $2.5 grand, I think, MPs,
well, well, there you are. And then pensioners are suffering.
It's below inflation, though, to be fair.
Sorry?
It's below inflation, MPs would tell you. I'm just saying, it's what they tell you.
Oh, yeah, but Julie, look, they've got subsidised canteens, they've got subsidised drink. You can ask £900 to look after your dog.
I know, don't even start me on that. Yeah.
Well, you know, they got it made. We haven't. We're paying for their having it got it made.
Well,
HS2 was the biggest mistake of all, which we're going to be paying back for the rest of our lives.
We'll be taking a break. We're going to be talking to an MP about all of this. So Ian Duncan Smith up next. Herbie, thank you for your call. It's coming up to 10:34. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. 10:36 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to my next guest, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith. He's an MP, of course, and former leader of the Conservative Party. A very good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, terrible Tuesday, awful April, not a good day. We haven't even had the national insurance rises hitting businesses. 26 billion pounds of those are hitting businesses from next week. But we're looking at gas, electricity going up, water going up, council tax, car tax, TV licence, broadband, mobile phone costs, you name it. People's bills are going up. Some by a big whack, some by, just 4.999% in terms of council tax, 4.6% on average for other bills. But it all adds up. It's all above inflation and it's hurting people. Whose fault is it?
Well, it's successive government's fault at the end of the day, because what's actually happened is we are trapped now in two competing elements. The first element is, if you look at energy, we now have the highest energy costs pretty much in the world. So no wonder industry has been shipping out from the UK. We have very little manufacturing industry left in the UK. Anything that uses high amounts of energy disappeared off. We're going to lose our data centers at the moment if we're not careful, because there's a huge amount of energy required to keep data centers cool, which is the key thing, and to power them up. Those two elements, our energy costs are spiraling. Part of it is this helter-skelter drive to net zero without understanding the inherent costs and the problems that are going to happen with that. So all of that was already in existence, made worse by Ed Miliband's, sort of zealotry into this process. Well, the second thing I think is then to look at taxation and costs. When you're in a hole, don't dig, stop digging. And we the last budget seemed to have said we have a problem, which we did, following on the back of COVID, our failure to recover. And I'll come back to the work and, to the sort of welfare side of this. But then what we do is we say, well, I tell you what we have to do. We have to prioritize elements of this and then tax the public even more. So we have a highly taxed public. They're now getting higher taxed to deal with a problem, but at the same time, that takes their money out of circulation. So shopkeepers and industry doesn't get what they need. So they then have real problems and they shut down, they disappear. So this is a spiral that has increased by hammering them for a second, maybe even a third time. We now hear from every economist that I can think of talking to who says she's going to fall short of all her targets. Look out for the coming budget in the autumn, because she's going to be forced to fill a black hole that she keeps talking about. And
things are only going to get worse with these Trump tariffs. Was it like Freedom Day or something? The American president calls it, but we don't even know what all these tariffs are going to be on. We don't know who they're going to hit. Apparently there's a blacklist of 15 countries. We don't know if we're on it or not. No one seems to know, least of all most of the people in the White House. It does seem that attempts to negotiate some sort of start of a free trade arrangement between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump haven't quite made it there yet, and we are expecting those Trump tariffs to hit us. How big an impact will that have? I mean, people might say, well, I don't work in the automobile industry, so it won't make an impact on me, but this can have a far-reaching effect on everybody, can't it?
Yeah, it does, because the US is our single biggest market as a single country. They're bigger than any single country in Europe by a long, long way. And we actually run a pretty steady position with them, sometimes marginally in surplus, because financial services are a huge exporter to the USA, because our two systems, work very well together, both using common law and the English common law, and at the same time the English language, and it works very well. So we are the biggest investor in the United States in the world, and the United States, strangely, is the biggest investor in the UK of all their markets. So all of this is important to us in a way that perhaps some of the other countries that may be putting tariffs on aren't. Why does it matter about the automotive industry? Well, it does matter because it provides a lot of skilled jobs in the UK. It's one of the last remaining areas of industry that was a success story. And part of the reason why they're in trouble and why they won't, it's going to be difficult to ride these tariffs as they might have done 15, 20 years ago. It's because we, the governments, have hammered them on net zero to the extent that they've been forced to move over to build electric cars, which they simply won't compete with the Chinese on, and they are going to get penalised if they don't reach certain targets. That means their flexibility to keep the costs of their cars down has just had a hole punched through it. And so that means that one of the key areas for technical skills, for serious apprenticeship work, will go if we're not careful. That have an impact on defence. We want to build up our defence industry. If you lose the automotive industry, that loses a whole load of skills for us. So these things matter, and those tariffs will impact us. But the problem is they're going to impact us at the very point we've taken decisions to have higher cost energy in pursuit of this zealotry of Miliband's, which he doesn't care about anything from slave labour in his products right the way through to collapsing British industry.
It just seems, I think, to a lot of us watching it from the outside, that this is just a slow motion car crash and nobody's taking any act. No one's even thought about, putting the brake on or accelerating out of it. And we are in an absolute disaster, and so many things need to change given where we are right now. Can I also ask you about another area of news today? And this is this two-tier justice row. Now, we've had the issue over sentencing guidelines, and that Sentencing Council basically agreed to delay the sentencing guidelines that were going to bring in basically two-tier justice as of today, ahead of a law that the Justice Secretary is going to bring in to stop that from happening. We only knew about it for a couple of weeks after Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, raised this issue. We've also seen this two-tier justice in terms of the police, where police officers are basically being told that they should be looking for equality of policing outcomes and aiming for racial equity, i.e. treating a black person and a white person the same ends up being racially unequal, so you should actually treat them differently. Now, this stuff is absolutely against every principle of justice and every principle of, I think, what we hold to our hearts in Britain. And yet the people who make these decisions, whether it's the Sentencing Council, whether it's an unelected, unaccountable Quango, whether it is policing organisations, police chiefs, we have no say over these things. These people are unaccountable, unelected, and it would appear never lose their jobs, even when they promote the most outrageous policies.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's successive governments have been bullied and weakly allow themselves to be bullied into believing that politicians may well be elected, but they are not expert enough to be able to decide things. So we hand them over to bodies. And what do the bodies do? They increase their remit and they pay themselves huge salaries. Just have a look at the PIP. And the mobility scheme in it. And of course, Motability, which provides these cars, astonishing grip on the industry, by the way, but the scale of that.
It's like 1 in 6 cars that new hires, leased cars, are Motability cars.
When I was there, it was really difficult to do anything about them.
You were Work and Pension Secretary.
Yeah, we did cut back quite a bit on them, but at the same time, it was very difficult. We did talk about possibly getting rid of the whole concept of Motability, but then we discovered that Her Majesty the Queen had been made their patron, which made it very difficult to move. But the problem is that was just an example of what happened. I brought in about 3 separate bodies back into the department so that we could run them. We may not be the most brilliant people at running things, but we certainly know this much, which is we were elected to do it, so we're better off do it ourselves.
I think most people are absolutely horrified that they're... I mean, yes, OK, so it's judges on these quangos, but again, we also know it's all very woke, it's all... And again, it's the unaccountability that is the concern for us.
You raised a very good point, by the way, on this issue about policing. We at the Centre for Social Justice, which I set up, which did a report on about things like stop and search and the issues that we were very clear that the families and the communities that suffer most from antisocial behaviour and street crime are the ethnic communities by a significant degree. So when people talk about, well, we have to get we arrest too many people from ethnicities, Afro-Caribbean boys, the answer is because in certain key areas, they are the ones that are committing the crime. The police know that. So what we ask them to do is not arrest them. And the answer is if you don't disrupt the supply chain of drugs, money and weapons, then you get more crime, more violent crime, and that is more damaging, believe it or not, staggeringly, to those ethnic communities. The most criminalized and attacked communities are, for example, Afro-Caribbean communities. So, when you arrest people doing that, you find the same people from that community. Some of them are involved in crime. So you can't turn around and say, what's our quota today? 3 people from this ethnicity, 2 from that one. Okay, right. Well, we've just done 4 on that. We better apologize. The answer is you follow where you think the crime might be, and disrupting it is a critical path
Absolutely, absolutely. The biggest single risk to young black men is not the police, it's other young black men. And those are the stats, it's as simple as that. Just want to finally get on to Marine Le Pen. Yesterday, the leader of the National Rally, the largest party in the parliamentary elections last time round in France, that snap election called by Emmanuel Macron, favourite for the 2027 presidential election. She has been banned from standing for public office for 5 years, even while she appeals a conviction for embezzlement of EU funds to be used for her National Rally party back in France. Regardless of whether or not the conviction is sound and whether or not she was politically targeted, leaving any of that aside, should any politician be banned from standing for public office in those circumstances?
Well, not by judges, they shouldn't. If they want to be banned, they should be banned by the electorate. Democracy, whether you like it or not, rough or smooth, as Churchill once described, is the best of the worst systems that are available to us to govern ourselves, and it has its notches. But the one thing that you do say at the end of it all, the people make decisions that is best suited for them. That's what they're there to do, and our job is to stand for election, and if they don't want us, then we get kicked out. That is the nature, not a set of judges who were appointed and who quite often don't live in the same world that many of the people that vote do. So, this idea, I'm astonished at France, because they've apparently quite lately introduced this because of fears of corruption, that they could ban politicians. That was introduced. So this needs to be sorted out and torn up. I have to tell you now, I have no brief for her particularly, but what I will say, as the far left said as well up in France,
yep.
We've talked about this set of nonsense coming out of this advisory council on the judiciary and on sentencing, which I think is really important to have outed, and now the government is reacting by getting rid of it. Well, this is what happens when you live in a world dominated by people nobody ever voted for, who tell you how to run your lives, but never are responsible at the end of the day for what decisions they make wrongly. And that is the key. And this one, I have to say, is an abomination. The idea that an unelected judge sits there like God Almighty and says to the electorate, you don't have a choice. I'm just going to take that away from you because I know more than you do. I'm sorry. At the end of the day, whether we love it or hate them, the public ultimately knows best.
Sir Ian Douglas-Smith, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Benjamin Butterworth, come back in on any of those topics we covered?
Well, I think his point about the fact that successive governments have caused the situation whereby all the costs are going up is actually a very honest one. The fact is that we have a situation in this country with the highest energy costs, with water costs rising, and that's been allowed to happen for generations.
Energy costs has been a deliberate policy.
Yes, but in all the utility costs, they've gone through the roof. And I think that he's absolutely right that this is a mistake that's been made across the board and made for a long time.
It's always fresh. One reason I like having Ian Douglas-Smith on is he's refreshingly honest about these things and non-party political. 10:48 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk to finance expert David Buick about the cost of living going up and those Trump tariffs. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
scheme like Rwanda, David, in order to deal with...
Come on, Mike, it never even saw the light of day, did it? So we don't even know whether it would have worked, and they scrapped it because it was ideological. We know that every assessment, every costing, every independent expert says the Rwanda scheme would not have acted as a deterrent. Experts are often wrong, Mike.
I don't think so in this case, and I think this is really Labour lining itself up for what to be judged by in 2028, 2029, David. It's already said it wants to get NHS waiting lists down, it now wants to tackle illegal migration as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benjamin Butterworth still with me. Delighted to be joined now by financial advisor and markets commentator at Aquis Exchange, David Buick. A very good morning to you, David.
Empress, top of the morning to you.
Top of the morning to you. Let's talk about these bills going up. I mean, across the board, gas, lecky, water, council tax, car tax, TV licence, your broadband and mobile phone costs. Some people are going to be getting an increase on the minimum wage, some people on the living wage. That'll be good. But in a week's time, we're going to, or our employers are going to be hit by the national insurance employer rate going up, and that's going to dampen down future hirings and future wage rises. We're all going to be worse off, pretty much. Whose fault is it? Who's to blame?
Well, I think we're going back really to the budgets in October of last year when this ludicrous £22 billion black hole was discussed. Much of it was the creation of the Chancellor herself by offering, I think it was a 9.8% increase to a lot of public sector workers who probably deserved it. But I just didn't like the way it was done.
I'm just never quite sure how much we need to pay train drivers to come to work, personally.
Well, I think they're out of it at 60 grand or 70,000 pounds a year. But I think the problem we've got is that we are back into an inflationary bubble. There's no question of any doubt. You reeled off. I mean, my water rates, for instance, went up from £417 to 620 quid, which is something like a 35%, increase. Now, we know Thames Water is in worse condition than anybody else, so I rather expected that. But for a lot of people, that is breathtaking. And then, as you say, you've got rates coming in, you've got the cost of driving licenses and everything that people need. And that is inflation. We saw inflation come down from 3% to 2.8%. Don't hold your breath, because I think it's going to be somewhere near 3.3 to 3.5 come the middle of July, because these things take, Julia, some time to sort of filter through.
And the key thing, of course, is when they talk about, we've had politicians in the last year saying, inflation's coming down. No, it's not. Inflation is still going up. It's just going up at a lower rate than it had been. We had it at over 11%. But it's never we never had deflation. The prices went up, and now they're going up at a lower rate, but they're still way higher than they were, 2019.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I think the biggest one of the lot that we've all seen, I think over the last 15 months, I think I'm saying that food inflation is at 35% since, 18 months ago.
Yeah, and again, I mean, the bills that have most gone up, food, energy, and things like that, are the bills that people don't have a choice about. They have to eat, they have to keep warm and have lights on. How much more are we going to be hit if and when, as we expect, these Trump tariffs to hit tomorrow? We don't even know, and it appears an awful lot of staff in the White House don't know what the tariffs will be. Donald Trump was on radio and television yesterday talking about how we're going to hit people with the same level of tariffs they're hitting us with, but it's going to be soft, it's not going to be as much. And I'm thinking, well, either it's the same or it's not as much. It can't be both. But it looks like we're not going to be exempt from those.
We used to have, before you were even a twinkle in your father's eye, a television programme called Maverick.
I remember.
Now, that's exactly what Donald Trump is. He's a maverick. And nobody actually, Julia, should be remotely surprised that we are at 6s and 7s, and we don't know whether it's Tuesday or Thursday, when it comes to these tariffs. But there is a $1.2 trillion deficit. And nobody can accuse Donald Trump of lying. He told the rest of the world, I cannot accept this. And so some sort of tariff war was always on the cards. I think the way it's been handled has been utterly ridiculous. It's 25% now on steel and aluminium. Oh, no, it isn't. It's 20 now.
Yeah.
And all right, we'll have a month's wait before we bring Mexico and Canada into it. And now we've got the question of the United Kingdom tomorrow, which will be part of Liberation Day.
Liberation Day, that's it, yes.
Yeah, Liberation Day is upon us. Now, we have no budget deficit or surplus for the United States. So there's no reason on God's earth why they should vent their spleen on us. But they are also very likely to do so, particularly in the auto industry, where, you know, we have got a pretty substantial amount of business that we've done there over a period.
I think it's 17% of our car exports go to the United States, and again, they're top-end cars, high-skilled jobs and the like. But what's interesting is often when Donald Trump talks about this, I mean, I don't know why he's just into tariffs, the greatest word in the English language. I mean, it's just madness. He doesn't seem to understand that it is a tax effectively on the consumers in America. And I understand about, you know, bringing back industry and manufacturing tomorrow. I get that. But he also seems to confuse, you know, VAT with a tariff. He insists that we do have this 20% tariff. No, it's VAT. It's a sales tax, which they also have in America. And yet he says we've got VAT on American goods, even though it's on every item that will be sold, I mean, other than food and, you know, children's clothing and like. So there's an element where we're kind of dealing with someone who doesn't even understand his own policy.
Well, he's had his bloodhounds out there, and I think they've been very, very cleverly selected. People who've taken over prisoners, people like Howard Lutnick, who've been in the business world for a very long time. But at the end of the day, with Steve Pezant, who's a very sensible person, who's a very, you know, respected fund manager, and he will come back and he will put his hand on the president's shoulder and say, look, he may not want to listen to Donald Trump, but the fact remains that when Goldman Sachs and people like that say there's a 35% of chance of a recession in the United States, forget what's happening in the rest of the world, then that's the time when you have to actually start listening. This is about the most inflationary piece of legislation you could possibly put on anybody. Yeah, and when you start bringing in the drug industry, when you start bringing in the cars which we know are going to come and the rest of it, it is absolutely penal. And you cannot blame other countries for saying we're going to take retribution out of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're not acting yet, but we'll see what comes. Really briefly, we're very short on time. Are you worried, though, that this could escalate into a bigger trade war and, again, worldwide recession, but also risk of war, because trade wars often end in war?
Well, I'm slightly concerned about the headline I read today about Taiwan and China. Yeah. Now, before, they have always, you know, jingoistically messed around, making us very uncomfortable. But this is a chance where they've been given an opening, whereby it might just prove to be something more. And I hope, again, Donald Trump has a look at this, also realizes that Vladimir Putin is not the man that he's flagged him up to be. Yeah. And maybe, never say never, but maybe these tariff implementations won't be as draconian as we hoped, because I think at the end of the day, he may have very strong, profound views, and he may not say, I don't care whether people buy this car or that car. At the end of the day, what Donald Trump loves above everything else is being rich. And he wants all his people in the United States of America to have a better standard of living. And that, I think, is stuck like, you know, a comic.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference between, you know, what's going to happen in the midterm elections or not, if people need to feel better off or not. David Buick, always so good to talk to you, commentator at Aquis Exchange. Thank you for that. Love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Are you worried about those tariffs? Are they going to impact you? Again, if we do have a worldwide recession, we're all impacted, folks. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, in particular about terrible Tuesday, awful April, kicking in with all those bills going up. That's all coming up next as well. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much for joining me on Terrible Tuesday as part of Awful April. You know, the one good thing about all those bills going up today, and my God, they're going up. Gas, electricity, water, council tax, car tax, TV licence, broadband and mobile phone costs. I have to read them because there are so many of them turning up today or in the next few days, is that they've kind of pushed aside all the April Fool's jokes you normally see in the papers. I don't think I've spotted one yet, unless this whole thing is an April Fool. Maybe the whole Labour government thing is an April Fool. Not a great joke, guys. Not a great joke. We're not laughing anymore. Maybe the £22 billion back hole that we've been filling in apparently since last July is the April. I don't know. But anyway, we are talking about all of that. I do want to hear from you. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text on 87322. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the standard national rate, and text costs one standard network rate message. But I'd love to hear from you about those bills going up. Who do you blame? Whose fault is it? What can we do about it? Well, how are you coping, really? Particularly how you're coping. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And of course, with just one day to go before Donald Trump's new tariff war hits countries around the world, including us, Keir Starmer's attempts to strike a free trade deal with the US are at risk over a free speech row. We'll be talking about that. Plus, we're going to be talking more about two-tier justice, whether it's police or sentencing, although the Sentencing Council backed down at the last minute last night ahead of Two-Tier Tuesday coming today, where we would have seen the introduction of different rules in terms of sentencing if people are from an ethnic or religious or community minority. I still don't know what a community minority is, and as opposed to if you are from a majority in this country. I think we all know what we mean by that. White. Also, Marine Le Pen, she's hit out at a court ruling yesterday that banned her from running for the French presidency in 2027. She said it was a political decision and she will appeal, but she's still banned from running until that appeal is heard. The French hard-right politician was found guilty of embezzling EU funds along with dozens of other party officials, and she was barred for 5 years from standing in election and a 4-year, pretty much suspended prison sentence. Joining me today for all the chat, Benjamin Butterworth, journalist and broadcaster. You know, an all-round sort of lefty.
I'm your April Fool.
You are.
That's it.
That's it. I knew it was coming at some point. It's wonderful to have you here. Let's start again with the household bills going up. They're going to hit everybody, and that's the thing about inflation. And we saw this with energy bills. They hit everybody, and whether you're a millionaire or whether you're on the lowest income, minimum wage, or on benefits, you're going to feel this. But the reality is these things hit people on the lowest incomes the most because you're spending on your basics, on your food, again way above the 3% inflation, your gas, electricity, your TV licence and things like that, and mobile phone costs. And yes, you do need a mobile phone if you're poor. I mean, you might not need the top of the range one, but you do even to make basic communication with the world. That it's a much bigger percentage of your outgoings.
I mean, it's a very important economic question because people on lower and middle incomes spend more of the money they earn than people that are able to save lots in the bank. And so it can have a harsher knock-on effect in terms of spending.
The economy. Well, we're told, but then that's where you've got the minimum wage. By the way, I did that in economics. Marginal propensity to consume is what it's called in economic terms. I don't know why it's the one thing I remember from 2 years of economics. Yeah, it's your likelihood that you will, when you've got that extra money in your pocket, such as we get extra money in our pocket these days, your likelihood of spending that as opposed to saving it. If you give extra money to rich people, they just put it in the bank because they don't need to spend any more. They've already got enough money to spend. Whereas people who are at the bottom of the economic pile, they're more likely to spend it. So that's good for the economy. So the minimum wage going up, the living wage going up, that would be a good thing, apart from the fact that businesses say they can't afford either. Yeah,
so today there's been the biggest rise in the national minimum wage in history. It's gone up by more than 16%. So the minimum wage in this country is now £10. One bizarre outcome of that is that if you've been to university and then get a job on minimum wage at, say, Tesco, you now have to pay back your student loan on a minimum wage salary, which just shows the absurdity.
On absurd interest rates as well.
Exactly.
Unless, of course, you've come from Europe and you've been pretending to do a course, so you'd have to pay it back at all. We'll pay for it, don't you worry.
Yeah, indeed. If you come from Romania,
always happy to pay for you. If you just come here and pretended to be a student, always
without
have to pay
speaking
your loan
English.
Back.
You don't even have to speak English for those dodgy loans. But when it comes to minimum wage rising, it's a massive leap. And, you know, for people on those salaries, 16% is a significant change. I dare say that with food inflation and utility inflation having been very high for years, this probably just gives them a fighting chance.
Gets them back to where they were a few years ago. And
Exactly.
that's the thing. And even when we've seen wages going up, I think about an average of something like 6%. Yeah, but if your wages didn't go up when it was 11% for a while by that amount, which most people's didn't, you're still kind of fighting to catch up, aren't you?
This is the problem with our economy. Wages in the last about 2 years...
Why are we agreeing?
Well, don't worry, I'm sure, we'll disagree in a minute. But wages in this country have only started to go up faster than inflation in about the last 2 years. From 2008, they have been basically stagnant.
Oh, I wonder why that would be.
Meanwhile,
was
you're going to say
anything that
immigration.
happened in all those years where we imported loads and loads of people to this country to work for very low wages? I wonder if that might have had an impact on wages of people here. I wonder. Answers on a postcard or give us a call, 0344 499 1000.
But, I mean, lots of countries have had high immigration. Germany has higher immigration than the UK does.
How's that working out for Germany? Have you seen their economic stats?
But their salaries are higher than ours. We have had stagnation since 2008. And I don't think, you know, a lot of times you talked about the train drivers. I'm afraid I disagree on that.
Do you think 70 grand is a perfectly reasonable salary for someone to drive a train?
What I think is that the problem with our economy is not people earning 70 grand, which ought to be a middle income. You know, if this country had inflation relative to the cost of housing and relative to the unavoidable costs of living, it would be more like 50k than 38k was the average salary. The US, Denmark, Northern Europe, their average salaries are 40% higher than the UK. The problem in this country...
They're richer countries.
And we'd be richer. We were as rich as them.
You don't get richer by paying people higher salaries. You get richer
you do.
by... No,
we don't have...
Hello, welcome to the left and the right in this country, everybody. If we paid everyone £1 million a year, we'd all be millionaires and everything would be fine.
That's not what I'm saying.
Can anyone spot the flaw in that who's over the age of 5?
That's not what I'm saying.
It is what you're saying.
No, it's not. What I'm saying is if you have more money in people's pockets, more money is going around and an economy grows.
But where do you get that money from? You only have more money to pay people more if they are more productive. They're working more efficiently. They're producing more from the same amount of time, the same amount of input. You need to produce something. We don't produce anything. One of the reasons why wages may have stayed higher in Germany for a while is because they've had a manufacturing base. And actually, manufacturing was less hard hit than, for instance, the service industry, the hospitality industry, on which lots of our economy depends. And the trouble is, when people haven't got any cash, they don't go out to restaurants, they don't go to pubs, they don't get an Uber.
But that's the point. People have had stagnant wages, and so the amount of money they can spend on those things...
You can't just give everyone more money.
But the argument doesn't make sense, because inflation in this country has not been caused by higher wages, which traditionally would be the argument.
That's true.
It's been
external
caused
factors.
by outside factors, right? And so
and energy policy.
And so don't tell me that in Northern Europe, where wages are about 40% higher than they are in the UK now, their economies do not have higher inflation than us. They are more equal than us, and they have had the wages go up at the rate that we had until the mid-2000s.
They have completely different economic bases in terms of what they produce relative to in terms of what makes up their economy. And actually, a lot of those countries haven't had the same kind of influx of huge numbers of low-skilled, low-paid workers, which we have had, because they've got a much more, say if you look at France, like a much more structured economic jobs market and the like. There are lots of different reasons why different countries do well. All I know is that we were told for years that our economy would be booming if we had mass immigration. We've had mass immigration off the scale, mass immigration for 20 years. We haven't had a boom. No, we haven't. GDP per capita, per head of the population, has not gone up. It's not gone up. We've been absolutely stalled for 20 years.
When we opened up to new countries in Eastern Europe in 2003-04, we had an economic boom that lasted some years, and that was partly fuelled by migrants.
Our GDP went up, yes, but we had a load more people here consuming services, getting entitled to things like housing benefit and the like, but bringing down wages for people who are already here. Because what a surprise, if you've got a Romanian who turns up and a Polish man who turns up who's living like 10 in a house and is sending his money home to his family, which is a very typical scenario, certainly in South East England, and they're able to undercut Mr. Plumber or electrician or builder or scaffolder and his wife who are both working full-time and trying to support a home, not living 10 to a house, then of course they're able to undercut, and that undercut people's wages. Look, I want to hear your I mean, I think he's talking abject nonsense, and I'm being kind because I'm on the radio and I'm not using a word I want to use. Give me a call what you make of this. 0344 499 1000. Tell me what you rate in terms of these costs going up. Can we move on? Can we talk about, just briefly, the two-tier justice, two-tier sentencing council guidelines? They basically, at the last minute last night, they were supposed to come in today. They've basically said, well, OK, we'll drop them. This is ahead of the Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood basically saying, I'm going to bring in legislation. It can't be enacted until Easter, but it will have cross-party support to prevent this from happening, where you basically are going to treat people from different minorities and majorities differently. Clearly unacceptable, clearly against every principle of blind justice. But we've also got two-tier police guide, basically saying you need to treat black and white people differently. Now, none of this is acceptable to British people. We've seen two-tier justice over political causes, people's views in terms of what happened in the Southport attack last summer and the Southport riots. There's absolutely no doubt, I think, in most sensible people's minds who've been watching what's going on in terms of sentencing on freedom of speech issues, sentencing on people's what people's motives are for their actions, what incenses people, and now in terms of people's colour, their religious views, whether or not they're trans or not. This has got to stop, because once we've got a justice system or a police system where nobody trusts it, then it doesn't work anymore.
Well, you have to be careful. There'll be 6 police officers at the door in no time, judging by that awful story in the Times at the weekend.
I'm amazed they haven't turned up, and I make a terrible cup of tea, but you're welcome to turn up, Mr. Copper.
But I think, what is shocking is that, first of all, this sentencing change came in under the Tories. They didn't say anything. Now, was that because they weren't paying attention, or was it because they kind of wanted Labour to get in trouble?
They were apparently speaking, but there's a whole big confusion about, what was actually being brought in and whether it was having pushback on. But isn't the issue that we've got unelected, unaccountable bodies in the police and in the sentencing council and the just judiciary, and they're not accountable to our democratically elected representatives?
I mean, the argument comes from the judiciary that we have a long established that the Parliament doesn't interfere in a court's rulings, but that's not quite
an individual
exactly
person.
Yes, which is why I thought that was such a ridiculous defence, and the head of the sentencing council wrote in fury at the idea that they would do that. Well, hang on. Parliament is sovereign. Parliament decides the bounds by which sentences can be carried out.
Parliament should decide the guidelines.
Exactly.
And with advice from the Sentencing Council. But doesn't it bother you if we say that we think this is even Shabana Mahmood, who pointed out, I'm a Muslim woman, I think this is unacceptable. Apologies. If this is basically wrong because it's racist and divisive, why are the people in the Sentencing Council who wanted to push this through and have only backed down because they know it's going to be overturned anyway? Why are they all still in a job?
I suppose on the one hand, you could say that, they should give their honest opinion. They should give their
I want to know what they think. But now we know what they think. Consider if it was the opposite way round. Considering if the Sentencing Council or police chiefs were saying, well, I think we should make allowances for white people in this country. I think we should make allowances for Christians or straight people, and that's what everyone would go, well, that's outrageous. So clearly you shouldn't be in a job anymore.
But, I noticed earlier, if the guidelines really do say exceptions for minorities, well, people that are both white British and born in Britain, both white and born in Britain, in London, are a minority. So maybe the sentencing guidelines mean you'd get a more lenient.
But why should someone, for instance, minority, say, you're a gay man, OK? So sorry, have I just outed you?
Oh, now the whole country.
Have you kept that quiet?
It's been my closest guarded secret for years.
But do you feel that you're in any way facing difficulties in the justice or the police system because you're a gay man?
No, I mean, I would never guess. Although, a couple of years ago, having said that, someone threatened to stab me on a train for being gay. I don't know how he guessed. And I did actually manage to get, it's quite difficult, a hate crime prosecution.
Shouldn't he just be prosecuted for threatening to stab you?
Well, that's not how the law works. And he was, the whole reason was because he assumed that I was gay. So that was very difficult. But I have to say the police were excellent in helping along.
I had 2 teenage girls threaten to slash my throat, and the police didn't think they should get a record. When the woman they managed to bother to identify, they didn't bother with the other one.
Yeah.
And their view, this a few years ago, broad daylight, absolutely just, she hasn't got a criminal record. Well, no, because you never prosecute. I made damn sure she had a criminal record because I want to know those people have got criminal records, so next time around they can go, it's not the first time she's done this.
Exactly. And actually that was why I wanted the prosecution of that guy, because he was clearly going to do it again.
But it wasn't. It doesn't count as a hate crime because I'm a white woman.
But the problem is that if police can send 6 officers to a door because some parents have asked questions of the school...
Written emails,
yeah.
Apparently it was a lot of emails.
45
so
apparently.
What?
But
so what?
Exactly.
If I had a daughter, if I had a child, as they do, with learning difficulties, and I'm only allowed to contact the school via email, I'd be sending a lot of emails.
But if police can find the time and resource for all those questions, then why, when friends of mine had their flat burgled and they sent them notices of where the charges were for the stolen credit card, they didn't even look up the CCTV and the location stuff had been bought on a stolen card. If police can't be bothered to do that, then there's a valid question of to say, if you ain't tackling burglaries and day-to-day thefts, then how have you got time
Let's not
for this
worry
stuff?
about emails. Yeah, exactly. Can I ask you, before we go to break, I want to talk about this major incident declared in Birmingham. 17,000 tonnes of rubbish has piled up over weeks and weeks of strikes.
There's no way to talk about Birmingham.
I'm born in Birmingham. I only spent 7 years of my life there, but I was born in Birmingham, so I still, my heart is still there. But this ongoing bin strike, huge amounts of waste. Whenever you see footage, just people literally walking past, just piled. The whole pavement is just rubbish. We've seen there's been sort of a blockading by bin men unions, blockading of the dumps, so people can't take stuff to the dumps. We are talking about huge amounts of rubbish, rats everywhere. The smell, it was just utterly disgusting. Look, I've always said, if lockdown had included locking down bin men, it would have lasted 2 weeks. Everyone would have gone, no, we're done. We want everyone back at work, please. But because bin men were still working, people could cope. And basically taking your bin out, which is your highlight of your week for some people. But, this is just untenable to continue, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. And Birmingham City Council has had serious problems. It's got a huge debt from both mismanagement and a case about equal pay. It's a total basket case. Yeah, and, the reality of councils failing, and we've had quite a number in the past couple of years, is these services we take for granted but are essential to living in an area end up with 17 tonnes like in Birmingham. But there's also this utter madness under this court ruling where, dinner ladies say that they should be paid the same as bin men. And so, it's largely women in the kitchens at schools and it's largely men doing the bin collecting. But saying they should be paid the same and these employment tribunals sort of mass rulings, which are massively impacting in terms of back pay for thousands of staff, which I think are utterly absurd, both in the private and public sector. If you want to go and be paid what a bin man's paid, go and be a bin man. Or, I don't know, go be a train driver, get 70k a year. Clearly a job where you are starting later, you're indoors, you can work, for instance, school hours, as a lot of mums do when they work, do the ladies do that work, is going to be easier work in lots of ways and preferential work for a lot of people over, being out on the streets from 4 in the morning in the pouring rain and the cold, handling people's rubbish. Of course those people are paid more. If you want to go and get that job, go and get that job. I don't know why you should be thinking it's not equal or equivalent work. It's a completely different job. I must confess, I would definitely rather be a dinner lady than a bin man. It's just utterly bizarre. If you want the bin man's pay, go and be one. But I think the problem here as well is that it's done retrospectively, and so that's what's got them in the mess. It might be nice in principle, but it's not nice. It's morally wrong in principle. It's completely unenforceable in practicality because the fact is, a lot of those, if women are on lower incomes, well, they're the ones paying the higher council tax. So think about how many women are struggling to pay the bills because they've got a 20% rise in their council tax or whatever it is. But everyone's council tax is the same. It's not because you're a woman. It's irrelevant. It's what choices that women make. It is about choices that women make. A lot of women choose to spend more time with their children. They earn less. A lot of them with men. Here's the thing. If you're not with your bloke or your partner and they're no longer with you and you're having to make ends meet, then you don't get those choices. Life is hard like that. Life's not fair. But it's got sod all to do with whether you're a woman or not. I do think it's unenforceable, though, because you can't just put potentially billions of pounds on a private or public body and expect them to find the money. It doesn't exist. Well, they can't, as we've seen. I'd love to hear from you. If you're in Birmingham and you're dealing with this, I would love to hear from you. Maybe you're one of the bin men who's on strike. Love to hear from you. Don't have to give your real name. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Love to hear from you in terms of Terrible Tuesday, all those household bills going up. How are you coping? And who do you blame? Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We'll get to your calls in a few moments. First up, though, it is time to find out how you could be within a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley this summer and £10,000.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Thank you, Mike, and good luck to you in that competition. 11:22 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
I'd urge anybody to go online and have a read of them. You'll probably be shaking your head as you do, thinking, why are the police not abiding by these in 2025? But one of them was that the police are the public and the public are the police. What that essentially means is the police aren't a special breed of people. They've been drawn from the public to do a job of protecting the public. So as people, let alone police officers, I'm sure they are going to be shaking their heads in disbelief.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 11:25 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benjamin Butterworth is here, and your calls that are coming in thick and fast. Just get your messages first, though, coming in about Terrible Tuesday, all those bills going up. Tell us your reaction. Jennifer says, given everything going on in the world, Trump tariffs, war, energy insecurity because of net zero, I can't say I'm surprised. Lawrence says, it's OK as long as MPs get a pay rise and have their expense accounts and claim for their dog's rent. Oh, and cockapoos, we talked about this yesterday, the MP who claimed 900 quid for her pet surcharge rent from the landlord. But I mean, if you could afford a cockapoo, I know some friends, I think they're around like 2 or 3 grand to buy. If you've got to spare 2 or 3 grand to buy a dog, you can probably afford the rent for your dog. Greg says TV licence should be scrapped, absolute zero value for money. I say no, an awful lot of people I know don't pay it anymore. Phil says it's simple, really. The government wants higher prices and higher wages in order to increase the tax take. Richard says, got rid of the TV licence, broadband and landline. Now I have to rely on my mobile phone. What's the point in working? It's a very sad state of affairs. And Sheila says, well, you get what you vote for. Ain't that the truth? Let's go to the phone lines. Paul is in Southampton. Hello, Paul. What do you want to say?
Hello, Julia.
Hello.
Reference your conversation earlier with your guest about wages being held down.
He says there's no wages weren't held down because of us having vast numbers of immigrant workers. What do you reckon?
Well, I used to work, I still work as an HGV driver, and I had an ADR licence, which is dangerous goods. Mm-hmm. And I went to work in the local refinery down the road from where I live, and there was a Polish guy on nights working for £2.50 an hour, less than me.
Yeah. So why would they want you when they could get more of him? Yeah.
Well, exactly. And as soon as Brexit came in and the vote went the right way, our industry, all of a sudden, we were getting paid. They were chucking money at us because they couldn't get HGV drivers for love nor money. Yeah. But now it's plateaued. I don't know if it's because of sort of current climate, but wages in our industry is still is stagnating again. But
I mean, I remember certainly sort of halfway through lockdown, at the end of lockdown, they couldn't get drivers for love or money, and wages were just being whacked up. Weren't people getting bonuses for moving companies?
Yeah, it was. I mean, they couldn't give you enough money, but and it was just everywhere you went, people were going for the foreigners because they work cheaper. Yeah, and they say, oh, they work longer. Well, no, they don't. In our industry, they just spent a lot more time in the lay-bys. But
also, HGV drivers, there are very strict rules about the length of time you can work. The law is it's very, very strict indeed, so they can't work longer than you.
Well, the problem is when they swap digicards, because, I'm not being stereotypical, but one copper said to me, there's quite a lot of them from a certain countries. They do look very similar. If you look at, the cheekbones and that, and if you don't look too hard at it.
This is hearsay. This is what I was not. Yeah, this is what you said you were told by. Yeah. So people are working. Okay, you're saying there's some questionable attitudes towards sort of the law as well. Paul, so appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Georgina is on the line. She's from London. Georgina, we spoke yesterday. What do you want to say?
Well, firstly, I want to say you look pretty in pink, my darling.
I'm going for a spring cheery colour.
I'm not in good form. I've been listening to what Benjamin Butterworth has been saying, and I need to say to him to take off his rose-tinted spectacles. This is not good. This country is unrecognisable to what it was. We've got more illegal immigrants coming in than illegal workers, and we're having to pay for these people. It's tantamount to every taxpayer taking in a non-rent paying lodger, and we don't want it. The Tories did help advance the problems we are experiencing, but this party, the Labour Party, have exasperated the problems we have now to catastrophic proportions, and every working and non-working family is suffering, Julia.
Well, one of the key things is, and we talk a lot about illegal migration, again, I think anyone who's not got a problem with that, I mean, I just think they're strange. I genuinely just think that's weird. But actually, the cost to the economy of legal migrants who are low income, even though they're coming here to improve their lives and they're working, so the cost to us long term of those people getting citizenship, as many do, staying here into their old age, the services they use, pension entitlement and things like that, even if they've come here and worked, if you're on low income or even average income, they're going to be a net drain on our society. And again, competition for wages as well, and means that employers don't try and train up, and there's no motivation for politicians to get our young people, the 1 in 8 who don't do anything at all, back into work. There is a massive impact and cost of legal migrants to this country as well, even if they're doing the best for their families.
Yes. I mean, Benjamin cannot defend the present government and the way things are going.
He can. Let's give him a go. Go on then, Benjamin.
No, but I can, because the reason we've not got growth is because the last 14 years they didn't build anything. The problem.
Last 14 years. Please, Benjamin, with the greatest respect to you, stop blaming the Tories for the...
To be fair, Labour didn't build anything either. They didn't build a reservoir or a power station, nuclear power station or anything like that.
This government is absolutely right, because it's raising the money to cover the massive costs of things like the NHS and the lack of quality in schools.
The NHS is already getting more money.
And then it's building things. The problem in this country, I'm afraid, is that we've got too many boomers that don't want anything built near them. We need reservoirs, we need millions of homes, and we need wages to rise. All of those things are essential.
Georgina?
You can't listen. You cannot get a doctor's appointment in this country. It is an impossibility.
So that's why they put the tax up to pay for it.
Benjamin, let me speak. We pay your wages. The books are being cooked to make it look like the hospital waiting lists are coming down. You have slashed benefits for the disabled and the elderly. while the elderly can't afford to heat their homes. How dare you say that the Labour Party is doing a good job?
She's got you there, Benjamin.
She hasn't, because actually the next couple of days pensions go up by 4.1%, almost double what inflation is right now, and they go up by that amount because it's how much
inflation.
because well, it's 2.8, but it's because of what wages are going up. So pensioners get more money in their pocket than everyone else.
Don't talk over me. This is all lip service because of the upcoming election. Please don't take us, the British public, for fools. We're all over you now. We know what's going on, and we're not standing for
Listen,
it
I'm going to give Benjamin some friendly advice. I wouldn't mess with Georgina. Georgina, have you thought of standing for public office, my love? I would love to see you at PMQs. I would love you to see you.
I wouldn't. I'd be terrified.
Have you ever thought of it?
No, do you know what, Julia? I've never been a politico. I'm a mum, and I've got my beautiful children, and I took the choice to stop work to look after my children. That was my choice. I don't expect this government to keep me. If I couldn't afford to have my children, I wouldn't have had them.
Yeah, what a mind-blowing concept for some people, eh? Georgina, absolute pleasure. Well, for me and for the rest of us, probably not for Benjamin. We're going to take a very quick break right now, and then we're going to be talking more about Marine Le Pen, banned from standing for the French presidential election 2027 after that embezzlement conviction. But will this actually help or hinder her National Rally Party? That's up next. This is Talk Over Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you for joining us. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:36 is the time. Just to let you know that Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, is giving a speech today behind a podium saying Labour's jobs tax, and of course talking ahead of the, not just on terrible Tuesday today, awful April, but what's happening on April the 6th, the new tax year, when of course national insurance, employers' contributions and the threshold for paying those contributions is going up. £26 billion tax rise on business. It's a jobs tax, pure and simple, and it will impact largely people on the lowest wages. That's the point she is making today. Let's talk right now, though, about what is going on across the channel. No, not channel migrants for once. Let's talk about Marine Le Pen. Just after I got on air yesterday, we learnt the news that Marine Le Pen, the leader of National Rally, three-time presidential candidate in the runoff for the presidency twice, the last two runoffs against Emmanuel Macron, which she lost, she was convicted of embezzlement of EU funds. Basically, conviction is for using funds that she was entitled to when she was was an MEP in the European Parliament, but using those back in France for her national party. She's been convicted along with many officials, dozens of officials in her party. The sentence, though, is what has really caused uproar in France and indeed around the world. And the sentence includes not just 4 years, 2 years suspended behind bars and 2 years with a tag and a €100,000 fine, but also a 5-year ban on standing for public office. This has caused outrage among many supporters for her, both at home and abroad, but also actually outrage among even the far left in France over this ruling by a court over who the French public can and cannot vote for. Let's talk about this now with French journalist and writer at the Telegraph, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, who joins us. Very good morning to you, Anne-Elisabeth.
Morning.
I have to say, this was quite a shocking result, and it seemed to be a result that, in terms of not the conviction but the sentence, which many in the party were not expecting. They seemed in interviews prior to the conviction to be very relaxed that this wouldn't happen, that this would be seen as kind of a move too far. But what has the general reaction from sort of French people been, whether they are supporters of National Rally, her party, or not?
Well, what's really interesting is that people seem to discover something that has been discussed at length before. And you just quoted the far left now complaining about this. Well, there's a very similar case coming up for Mr. Mélenchon, the leader of Bode, and therefore he doesn't want to be served with the same treatment, which he probably would. The one first thing that has to be said is that Marine Le Pen and her 24 co-defendants in the dock are guilty. It's been proven there were emails of supposed parliamentary assistants working for the European Parliament who would send emails months after they started receiving European salary. Shouldn't I go to Brussels to meet my supposed boss? Including Marine Le Pen's sister. So it's not as if she's not. But on the other hand, she is appealing. And this specific law is a very badly written law that was passed under President François Hollande in a great orgy of political purity. And it provides for the ineligibility sentence not to be conditional to an appeal. Marine Le Pen is appealing, and in normal law, she would be considered innocent until the last judgment has been passed. And in this instance, she is barred from running from now. And that's what is creating the trouble.
And we may not see a result of any appeal for a year and a half or so. And of course, that makes it difficult. No doubt at all, she is, by a small margin, the front runner to win the next presidential election, to get into the runoff, as she's done the last 2 times. This would be her 4th attempt. She said it would be her last attempt. We don't, of course, know who she'd be running against, even if she could stand, because Macron not standing for a 3rd term. But there's no doubt at all, in terms of the snap elections that were called by Macron last spring, that we did see National Rally becoming, the single biggest party. They've got a huge support, growing support, particularly among young people, spreading across the nation. A lot of people are saying that actually this could help her party rather than hinder it, because of the outcry over the idea that, unelected judges are imposing this sentence for political reasons, as she herself claimed last night on TV.
Well, we've never had a tradition of electing judges in France, and they're all civil servants.
No, but they're unaccountable to the people. Whereas the people could make a decision they could say, you're convicted of embezzlement, we don't want you to be our presidential candidate, but they're not going to be given that option.
They have handed her a victim card. If they condemned her and said, you are guilty of this, was proven, and then she'd appealed, it's entirely different. And she's now sort of using the victim card. And even people who are not personally concerned with this are worried about the principle of the law. France is a country that always had problems with party finance, with the result that when we passed a moralizing law for party financing that was allowed to citizens, because corporations are not allowed to give any money to parties, it was passed in 1988. It is about £7,000 per person, so you can pay a maximum £14,000 when you're a couple. And that amount has not changed since 1988, because nobody dared up it just as in the instance of the expenses scandal in Britain, nobody had upped the salaries of MPs for a long time because that was also supposed to be unpopular. And that I'm not excusing her, but that explains a few things.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I've covered the EU an awful lot as the political editor, and we know, the EU, I can't even remember the last year, I'm sure you can't, of where they actually had their finances signed off, the actual European Union, the European Commission. There is a huge amount of corruption, fraud, embezzlement, and God knows what going on a grand scale with EU funds, both in nationwide countries, among MEPs. I've no doubt at all about it that she committed this crime along with these officials, but the choice to bring prosecution against her and her party as opposed to against other parties, I'm very sceptical that wasn't a political decision. And in terms of the punishment, again, whether one holds a card for her or not, we think back to 2016, Christine Lagarde, a former French finance minister, then at the head of the World Bank, the IMF. She was found guilty of negligence over national funds, public funds that went to a private company. She always said she was innocent, but when she was found guilty, there wasn't even a punishment, and she was reconfirmed as the boss of the IMF. I think most people think that...
I can't say this because basically Christine Lagarde, who is a lawyer, she was at the head of a large American law firm, and after 20 years of an incredible tug of war between a French businessman and a kind of Alan Sugar, if you like, and the government, she went and she said, look, we need an arbitration in this case. And she named 3 of the best lawyers in France, including one from the Constitutional Council that had been on the Constitutional Council. They looked at the arbitration. She was not involved in this. She was just the minister. And they said, well, actually, you do owe him money. And she was then accused of that. And that was a fix. That was a much more transparent fix. She was not only innocent. She'd done her job. It's just that there's no such tradition of arbitration rather than...
Okay, you're saying that's not a direct example. What about the outcry we've seen from sort of the liberal left over what's been happening in Romania with an opposition leader being barred from election? What's happened with in Turkey with Erdogan banning the mayor of Istanbul from standing outcry? Everyone's out in arms. But if it's someone we don't agree with, Marine Le Pen, so-called far right, well then it's okay. This is the sort of stuff that kind of did for the Democrats in America, isn't it? Isn't there a risk where the lawfare, even the perception of lawfare being used, I've thought a lot of the cases against Donald Trump were bang to rights, but the decision of when to charge him and when to push those cases was seen by many, and including by me, as political. That this actually could do more damage to the people who are supporting it and could actually help, because of course there are alternative candidates for the French president, including Bardella.
Yes, Bardella is the obvious candidate. When the whole case came to fruition a month ago, he said, if Marine Le Pen is ineligible and I run for president and I win, I will immediately take her as my prime minister, which is his right, by the way. He can do that, no matter what she's been condemned about. But that was a year ago, or almost, and the election is in 27 if Macron doesn't call one before. And we do not know whether he will abide by promises made so long after the fact. So we don't know. Yeah. It might mean the end of her career.
Yeah, that's what many people are saying that. She'd already said this would be the last time she'd run. But there's no doubt at all in terms of the rise of parties, disparaged as far right. My God, the party is the Front National, very much was a far right party, moved very much more to the centre. Giorgio Bardella, for instance, the son of migrants himself, very different figure. We've seen the success of Giorgia Meloni in Italy, once considered far right, beyond the pale, now absolutely in the fold of the G7 leaders. We've seen the rise of the AfD in Germany, the rise of Reform, topping the polls. In the UK, a poll the other day saying more people think that Nigel Farage would make a good prime minister than any of the other party leaders. At the end of the day, do you think that this rise of the right, whatever we'll call it, hard right, that actually this is now unstoppable?
I think they're not comparable. I think the populists in Europe are like Tolstoy's Unhappy Families. They're all populist in a different way, and some of them are actually getting places, and Giorgia Meloni is a very good example. And some of those are still a bit unsavory. If you take the AfD, it's like Germany, it's regionalized, and some people within the AfD are good, and some people within the AfD are frankly scary. I think we should take them one by one.
That's a very, very good point. That's a very good point. Just if you had to get, I mean, obviously we don't know how an appeal would go, what happens. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think she'll end up being able to stand?
There are now calls by neutral people, not self-interested, saying this law was badly written and it should be changed, which would be interesting. There's also a recourse to the French Constitutional Council. Another MP from an overseas territory who has he's suffering exactly the same problem, and he put this, the Council of State, the administrative tribunal, put this to the Constitutional Council. If the Constitutional Council decides, actually the Constitutional Council has more or less expressed what they will say in 2 days, and they said there must be freedom for the judges to express their judgment, which is the law is not unconstitutional. Judges can be, they do not, it's not compulsory for the judges to take this practice. And it's basically lobbing the responsibility to the specific judges who took that decision.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it's going to work out, so there's a good chance that she will not be able to run.
It's going to be fascinating to watch, it really is. Anne-Elizabeth Moutet, French journalist and writer at The Telegraph, thank you so much indeed for joining us. Benjamin Butterworth, your reaction to what she had to say?
Well, I mean, if the law is badly written, they can change the law. If they think that this is going to have problems because actually it makes her the victim, well, then maybe Macron could have his sort of moment of reprieve where he tries to bring the country together on this and says, actually, we should edit that law so this isn't
But there'll
possible.
be an awful lot in the sort of centre and so-called moderates. I don't think they are moderates, but the centre ground, supposedly, of French politics, as we have here in the UK, where they'd be quite happy for her to be barred, and they'll think that they'll pat themselves on the back at their dinner parties, in Paris, and say, "Well done, good move." We don't care how angry people get, but I'm intrigued to see whether or not French end up on the streets. They like doing that.
I think there's no doubt about that. I think whatever happens, they like to be on the streets protesting. I think it's right that the punishment fits the crime, and the crime was to fund her presidential ambitions, and now those ambitions are affected.
So she faced a prison sentence and a fine?
Well, she's got a prison sentence. She's going to have to wear a tag for 2 years as part of this.
She's not actually going to go behind bars. But again, I don't know why, if it's not worthy of going behind bars, not sure it's worthy why the French public are not allowed to have a say in whether or not they think she's good enough to be their president or not, whether I would vote for her or not. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do get in touch, 0344 499 1000. A lot of people saying after what happened with Trump, what happened with Marine Le Pen, could something happen with Nigel Farage? Remember the debanking by Coots? Actually there are lots of different ways in which, I would say Ofcom going after his show at GB News in a way that they seem to be utterly unbothered by other political shows on other channels. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Up next, we are going to be talking about a Talk exclusive about the number of police officers turning up to work on drugs and drunk. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
She said that she'd bring forward emergency legislation. She hasn't. There's now no chance whatsoever that by the end of today she can stop these new guidelines coming into force. And so from tomorrow morning, 15 hours time, you're going to have people going to court and being dealt with under these two-tier guidelines. That's completely wrong. She utterly failed. And what I want to see is this situation rectified as quickly as possible. But if she took my advice, taken my bill forwards, it would have been fixed long ago.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:53 is the time. Let's talk about coppers. If they turned up, if, say, you'd written too many emails to your daughter's school and 6 coppers turned up in the morning to arrest you for no good reason and question you for 8 hours, I wonder how many of them might be drunk or on drugs. And a shocking new exclusive with Talk has revealed that police officers across Britain have been caught taking drink and drugs before arriving at work. An explosive Freedom of Information investigation by Talk has uncovered 112 police officers and staff at the police found to be under the influence or in possession of drugs over the past 3 years. A further 83 identified as being intoxicated on shift or just before clocking in. The worst offender, Greater Manchester Police, topping the shocking list with 80 officers or staff busted for drugs and a further 17 for being drunk at work between 2022 and 2024. By the way, these are just the ones they've found. Let's talk about this with Kevin Hurley. He's a former Detective Chief Superintendent at the Met Police. A very good morning to you, Kevin.
Good morning.
Are you surprised by these figures?
Well, historically, the first ever recruit to the Metropolitan Police back in, I think, 1880-odd, after parading for duty, was subsequently dismissed that day for being drunk on duty.
Really?
So there is a...
'Twas ever thus.
This historical fact there for you, Julia. I can't remember the exact date. In actual fact, not really. I mean, if you look at 112 people and the size of the workforce over 3 years, that's 250,000 people. That's 1 in 2,500. That's not a bad statistic.
Not so bad, although it probably should be zero. I mean, we know we've got, drunk driving issues. We've got drug driving, a massively growing problem. But I think a lot of us would be quite surprised. I mean, in some random tests, Class A opiates turning up. Not even, not that it'd be okay if it was cannabis, but not even just a Class C drug, but Class A opiates turning up in the bloodstream of police officers. You'd think they'd know better.
Well, you would do, Julia, but the police, unfortunately, have some wrong-uns in them. They recruit from different sections of society. The workforce is much younger now than it once was because the police cannot recruit or retain staff in numbers, and people are leaving early because, frankly, the offer and the morale, the leadership is so poor. So, if you're recruiting people straight from university, young people where taking cannabis, drinking to excess is normal, then you will get that. And I've come across many cases over the years where there have been officers drunk on duty, being sent home or disciplined, and so on. Those stats actually are surprisingly lower than I would have thought. So,
well, again, those are the ones, but those are the ones that have been caught and identified. I imagine in other cases there's a quiet sort of, John, you need to head home, or it'll all be covered up, and coppers will cover for other coppers. They cover for their colleagues, don't they? They're not going to go, please sir, I think Terry's too drunk to be at work. But the thing about this is, look, it's terrifying if people are operating lorries and cars and they're at risk to us, but it's also very terrifying if somebody's under the influence of drugs or alcohol and they're in a position of power over us, able to arrest us, able to make key decisions about people's lives. That is a real concern.
Yeah, of course. And the bottom line on it is, Julia, I'm pretty sure in almost any police station or police building in the country, if someone were like that, then they would be exposed on the spot because they risk compromising their colleagues. They most certainly would not be allowed to drive. And in fact, I can put my hand on my heart and say they'd be breathalyzed on the spot and probably would lose their job. I mean, the bottom line is the figures sound big, 112 in 3 years, but when you consider the workforce is in that period is 250,000, it's less than one in 2005.
But bearing in mind, that's just the ones we know about, and that's just the ones that returned the Freedom of Information request. And as you know, often in the cases, you don't get these figures returned, and so it's only a small snapshot of where it could be. But no, I absolutely take your point on that. But do you think, just finally, I mean, do you think the problem is getting worse because of that younger intake?
I think young people have different values and standards. The whole way that police are recruited and trained now is very different to one where, frankly, it was an inoculation that you wore the uniform. There were certain values and standards expected to be upheld in the way you behaved. And I think that's dropped off. And the indication to me is just the way so many police officers now wear their uniforms in public. Of course, the clothes they're issued are more utilitarian where they are, but
a more casual approach.
Pride. Yeah, I mean, they don't take a pride in how they look.
Yeah,
which very rarely in headgear. It's all an indication of a lack of discipline, a lack of values and standards, very poor quality leadership. I mean, the issue on it is that people who are cops are basically very good people. They want to do the right thing. Where they've failed is, first of all, at the chief officer leadership level, and the aspirants to that, who are the superintendents, who will do very often anything to get promoted. I know.
Yeah, and we know, and there's that PC thing. I'm going to have to leave it there because we're out of time. But Kevin Hurley, so appreciate you joining us, formerly of the Met. Quick word from Benjamin Butterworth listening to that. You were chuckling when
I was,
because Kevin said.
For radio listeners, the headlines on the TV was lines of duty, and which really made me laugh. That was pretty witty. But I mean, the idea there's bad apples in the police force won't surprise anybody.
And back then and now?
The idea of 112 sounds like it's not endemic, but the idea that anybody takes illegal drugs and works as a police officer...
the Met Police didn't respond to the request. Loads of the police forces didn't respond. That's just the ones that responded. The Met is the biggest. So that's the thing. Again, I just find it extraordinary that police, that many organisations simply don't respond to these requests, which are legally binding requests. They should have these figures to hand. 11:59 is the time. Up next, we're going to take the latest headlines, and then we're going to be hearing from the brilliant, the wonderful chief political writer at Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill, on what's going on at home and abroad. I want to hear more of your calls as well about coping with those cost of living rises. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Welcome back to the show. Very much appreciate you joining. We're with you all the way until 1 o'clock, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is lovely to have your company. Lots more to talk about in this hour, including those essential household bills that are going up today. Gas, electricity, I'm going to have to read the list because there's so many. Gas, electricity, water, council tax, car tax, TV licence, broadband and mobile phone costs, all going up by varying degrees. In terms of the big lump sum, it's your energy bills, but in terms of percentage, it's very much more likely to be your water bills or maybe even some of your council tax, depending on where you are. I'd love to hear your reaction to Terrible Tuesday, the start of Awful April, as it's known. Also, of course, we've got businesses dealing with the national insurance hike coming on the 6th of April as well. So we're going to be talking about all of that. Also going to be talking about the new two-tier justice row over policing. This after the Sentencing Council climbed down last night over the introduction of two-tier justice rules of government threat to basically bring in a new law, which is going to be brought in by Easter to block the guidance. But why are all the people who thought it was OK to have different rules for people from different ethnic or religious backgrounds, or whether they think they're trans or not, why are those people still in a job and now to have any say over our justice system? Because are they not breaching the very principle of justice being blind? Love to hear your thoughts on that. We're going to talk more about Marine Le Pen being banned from running for the French presidency in 2027. Also, those channel crossings under Keir Starmer have been higher than under any of his Conservative predecessors, with more small boat arrivals so far this year than at any time since they began 7 years ago. Plus, it's another one of those mad woke stories. Again, we did double check. Is this an April the 1st story? I hope we're sure that it's not, but it could easily be. According to an historian at Oxford University, Muslims learned about homophobia from the British Empire because apparently the horror of same-sex relationships, that's a quote, not from me, did not exist in Islamic culture before the 19th century. So that's our fault too. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. It's all coming up. Joining me for the chat today, Benjamin Butterworth, journalist and broadcaster. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. And it's no longer April Fool's now. It's 4 minutes past 12, so we're safe.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Well, I mean, I hope someone double-checked that. I have to say, most days, I think most of the stories in the news must be April Fool's. So I kind of just assume they are now, whatever the day of the year. And we've got so much to talk about. I do want people to get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call, whatever we're talking about, but particularly Terrible Tuesday and all those bills going up. Who do you blame? How are you going to cope? Do text us on 87222. You can get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text costs £1, standard network rate message. But Benjamin, we'll get your thoughts on all of the big stories once again after we've spoken to our next guest in this hour, Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer at Spiked Online. A very, very good afternoon to you.
Hi, Julia. How you doing?
Thank you very well indeed. Lovely to have you here. There's lots I want to talk to you about. Can we just start, first of all, with two-tier justice? Because we are in an absurd scenario where, as of today, we were supposed to be seeing what the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, dubbed Two-Tier Tuesday. And the sentencing guidelines issued by the Sentencing Council basically were saying start as of today, but they've backed down because they're facing legislation to stop this going ahead. That basically courts should treat people from different racial, religious, sexual proclivity, and whether they're trans or not, treat them differently in terms of whether or not they should get a pre-sentencing report. This is largely, usually, to try and see if you're going to mitigate the sentence, give them a softer sentence. But after they backed down on this, we also learnt more about this issue, this guidance issued to police, telling them that they should be aiming not for equality under the law, but equity, so that they would have to treat black and other minorities differently to how they treat white people, suspects or defendants, because of their race and because of, even they were saying, community trauma. What do you make of this, complete twisting of the principle of blind justice?
Absolutely, that's exactly what it is. And, you know, the guidance that the police are talking about, I noticed that it said, you know, being in favour of racial equality doesn't mean being colourblind. Yes, it does.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
literally what it means, yes.
That's exactly what it means. And there's a reason that Lady Justice is often depicted with a blindfold, because the law is supposed to be blind. It's supposed to rule without fear or favour, and it's not supposed to judge people on the basis of their heritage or their skin colour or their sex or anything else. You know, if it's true, and it is true, that in the past people from certain minority groups were treated more harshly by the cops and by the law, that is true. But you don't fix that by then racializing the justice system in order to prevent that from happening, because that then just makes it unfair for people who are white and heterosexual and male, etc., etc. You do it by being colour blind. You don't give someone a harsher sentence because they're black, and you don't give someone a harsher sentence because they're white. And the fact that our cops and some of our legal system doesn't understand this, that's really worrying.
Yeah, and so much of this comes from critical race theory, something which most sane people avoid like the plague, which has this whole theory that by definition white people are oppressors and are racist. By definition people of colour must be victims, and they're very much drawing on the American history of race relations, which is based on, you know, pretty much everyone who was black in America was a slave, was taken there against their will, outrageously treated. I mean, they've survived the journey across the Atlantic, and indeed we had laws in our, you know, certainly in my lifetime, Jim Crow laws and others, which were, you know, basically racially segregated. But we don't have any of that history here. People in this country who are of ethnic minorities have chosen to come to this country. We've never had laws that have prevented, you know, black people from voting or having the same civil rights here. We just don't have that history. And yet there's been importation of basically Black Lives Matter propaganda, whether it's about policing or whether it's about, you know, justice in society, the economy, you name it, everything, that somehow the majority white population is oppressing the minority black population. And often stats are brought out on this. People say, you know, black people are getting longer sentences, black people are more likely to get custodial sentences. I looked up the stats on all of this before I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago for The Sun. And actually an awful lot of this is frankly untrue. Different ethnic groups do have different outcomes, but largely actually it seems to be for demographic reasons, in terms of whether you live in an inner city, whether you're more likely to be in a social and economic group which is poor, or whether you're more likely to have a dad in your home or not. Massive impact. Whether you're likely to plead guilty at all or at an earlier stage in the proceedings, and the sorts of crimes that are committed by different ethnic groups because of those demographic and other reasons. All of that gets swept aside. We just have a blanket. Black people are hard done by, white people are privileged, end of. And it's too simple.
It's way too simple. But you know what, Julia, we're not allowed to talk about all those complex social, cultural problems that you're mentioning there.
Where are the dads? Where are the dads?
Exactly. And, you know, Lord Sewell made this point a few years back. I know he's in the headlines for something else at the moment, but, you know, this man is a font of common sense as far as I'm concerned.
This is Tony Sewell, who's written fantastic reports on these exact issues.
Exactly. And a few years ago, he made the point about fatherlessness. He made the point that there is a great social tragedy in this country that no one wants to talk about, which is that almost 50% of black kids grow up without a dad. And that does push young black boys in particular into gang culture, where they go looking for authority figures elsewhere. Yep. These are important social tragedies that deserve more of our attention, but we're not allowed to talk about them in all their complexity. We just have to nod along to the kind of American imported idea that everything is down to racism, everything is down to whiteness. But, you know, I think in relation to all of this, Shabana Mahmood deserves a lot of credit, actually, because...
She's the Justice Secretary. She said she would stand up against this and bring in legislation against this.
That's right. And in her showdown with the Sentencing Council, she has asserted the sovereignty of Parliament against this arrogant quango that thought it could do whatever the hell it wanted. And she's also asserted the ideal of equality before the law. Whether her party, Labour, can keep running with this devotion to equality is another question. But she has actually done incredibly well in this fight, and she deserves a lot of credit for that.
Absolutely. Again, though, she did point out, you know, as a Muslim woman myself, I don't want to be treated differently. But again, you get into these situations where she can only say that because she's a Muslim woman and she's from a minority, and we get into this ridiculous scenario where what your utterly irrelevant ethnic or other background is becomes more important than what you're saying, which is a craziness. But interestingly, you mentioned the sovereignty of Parliament, and this ties in, of course, with, you know, the immigration. Another story today, there's the huge number of people coming across, illegal migrants that we basically can't tackle because we can't stop the pull factor, which is regardless of how you tackle smashing the gangs or anything else, at the end of the day, people want to come to this country because they believe they'll be able to stay here and work here, black market or not, that they're going to still want to come. And we've had these battles over the Rwanda policy, which was never going to, on its own, make a big change. It wasn't the same as the Australia policy where no one sets foot in the country and they dealt with it within a few months. But the principle that Parliament is sovereign, not the courts. Parliament can change the law, withdraw themselves from, withdraw the country from the European Court of Human Rights and Convention on Human Rights and all of that. This is the thing. This very much ties into this. We have so many unelected, unaccountable quangos, courts, judges, justices themselves. And although on the individual cases they're entitled to make those individual decisions, they are applying across the board, I say, values and guidelines which simply do not tally with what the democratic public actually think.
Exactly right. And, as you say, they have the right as judges, of course, to make judgments on individual cases. But it too often leads to a new value system, or it too often is done openly to show up the government, to say to the government, well, you're wrong, you're not allowed to do this. We don't care that millions of people voted you into power because we know better than them. Yeah. That is what a lot of this lawfare fundamentally boils down to. We had a civil war about this in this country 350 years ago, which established the primacy of the House of Commons, the primacy of the elected wing of government over all the other wings of government. And it's in our Bill of Rights, the idea that if there was anyone outside of the Commons that has more power than the Commons, then we live in a tyranny, not in a democracy. And we are sleepwalking into that very situation. But there is so much we need to do to make sure this doesn't happen. We have to get out of the ECHR, in my view. We have to rethink our commitment to the Refugee Convention. We have to dismantle a lot of human rights law, which is actually about empowering judges rather than protecting human rights, and assert the right of ordinary people in Britain to determine the fate of the nation.
And this is it. This goes all the way back to the attempt to overturn Brexit, either through the courts or through just, well, we just won't enact, we'll just stop it from happening, we'll make every possible challenge possible, when it was the blatant and clear will of the British people, blaming it on, oh, well, it must have been the Russians, it must have been this, it must have been, and, the attempts, the legal attempts, electoral commissions, arresting, and the cases that were brought against, Aaron Banks, Leave.eu founder, Darren Grimes, a friend of mine who faced, harassment for, years and years, when he committed no wrongdoing whatsoever in terms of his use of funds for part of the Leave campaign. And I think a lot of this is being echoed in what's going on in France. Now, we had an outcry in the last few weeks about treatment of the Romanian opposition leader, barred from standing for office, outcry from the liberal left and the centre, outcry over what's gone on in Turkey, where Erdogan, he assumed fairly dictatorial powers in recent years, and his banning of the mayor of Istanbul, his sort of chief opposition leader, from running for office. And now we've seen, and again, liberal left outcry. And now we see yesterday Marine Le Pen, the leader of the French National Rally, I'm going to say hard right rather than far right. I don't like this term far right, hard right party, from banning her from standing for public office, including, of course, the 2027 French presidential election, where she is the front runner on her fourth attempt at running for that office on behalf of her party. She's been convicted of embezzlement. It does appear bang to rights. Do you think that the decision to bring charges against her party, when we know just how unbelievably corrupt pretty much the whole of the EU is, but her party facing those charges, but also the sentence banning her from standing for public office, do you think this is another form of lawfare against democratically elected politicians?
Absolutely. I am horrified by what has happened to Marine Le Pen. And I say that as someone who could never see himself as voting for her. I'm not a fan of Marine Le Pen, but this is an act of lawfare against French democracy. It seems pretty clear that it's a a pretty trumped up charge designed in large part to prevent her from standing in an election that it looks like she would have won. And, you know, every single voter in the French Republic loses out as a consequence of this. Those who wanted to vote for Marine Le Pen lose out, and those who wanted the chance to defeat her at the ballot box also lose out. Everyone has had their rights taken away from them. I just feel that Europe is teetering very precariously on the abyss of authoritarianism, because we had the Romanian case that you mentioned. We know that the EU is incredibly undemocratic and often meddles in countries' internal affairs.
And if you have a referendum and they don't like the result, they make you run it again.
Exactly. So we've had this building up for 20 or 30 years in Europe where democracy is seen as a disposable thing. Now it's coming to fruition in the blocking of one of France's most popular politicians from standing in an election. This is incredibly serious. And I think all of Europe, whether you're left wing or right wing, needs to be treated as seriously as it deserves.
It is very interesting that even the likes of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who's very much on the far left, socially, hard left, he came out speaking out about this. And Viktor Orban of Hungary, and obviously Je suis, Marine. But she's going to appeal, and unusually the ban stands while she appeals, which is going to create difficulties. There is a possibility, though, that this may work out very well for the party. She, although a very popular figure and has made herself sort of a much more sort of appealing figure, moving close to the centre ground on many issues, and ousting sort of blatant, outright racists from her party, including indeed her own late father. But that she could be replaced by Jordan Bardella, much younger character. He's only around 30. He's a very charismatic, young, handsome man. He himself the child of immigrants, that he could take his chances running for the presidency. It may well be that by making her appear more of a victim, this could actually help the party rather than hinder it.
You know, everyone should know by now that lawfare can often end up making a party more popular or a politician more popular. Look at Donald Trump in America. Yeah. He was attacked by lawfare constantly for the past 4 years. There was a concerted effort by the elites to prevent him from standing to be president, and his popularity just grew and grew and grew. I think we could definitely see a similar blowback in France. And also the other thing about France, and one of the reasons I secretly love France, is that it has a very fiery history. It has a very revolutionary history. People like to take to the streets there, which I think is their prerogative. That could happen too. The idea that you can put a lid on voters' emotions and desires and who they want to see in the presidential palace, and that there won't be any blowback, I think we're in for a surprise.
And we've seen the French farmers, basically blocking routes into Paris, and we saw during the French Olympics as well, Paris Olympics, they're taking action. Of course, the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vests. I mean, they managed to overturn laws. There's no doubt at all. And again, of course, with the current president, Emmanuel Macron, incredibly unpopular. I mean, basically, he's only ever got in both times simply because he wasn't Marine Le Pen. And that's really rather changed in recent years. We shall see what happens there. It's very interesting. You mentioned Donald Trump there. Let's just finally talk about Donald Trump. He calls it Liberation Day tomorrow. I'm not quite sure what people are being liberated from, the imposition of tariffs. Now, across the world, we've had some tariffs already announced, some already in place. No one's really sure what the tariffs are going to be or which countries they're going to hit, which goods, at what amount. He said it's going to be the same as the tariffs other countries impose on US goods being imported to their countries, but it's going to be lower than that. I don't know. It can't be the same or and lower at the same time. No one seems to know, least of all Donald Trump. He doesn't even know what a tariff is. He thinks VAT here is a tariff. Of course, it's not. It's sales tax on all goods, including those made here. But how worried are you about this? I'm worried that not only does this impact our economy and the world economy, that a trade war could actually escalate into something more serious, given where we are with Russia and Ukraine, where we are also with China. We've seen these absolutely terrifying military exercises surrounding Taiwan in the last 24 hours after very belligerent talk from China about willingness to take Taiwan by force. How concerned are you that this tariff war is the start of something we might not be able to control?
Yeah, it's unpredictable and it is worrying. And I often find myself thinking, what's going to happen next? You often feel that you can predict where politics is going to go, but at the moment I don't feel that at all. And the thing is that it's very clear now we live in a wholly new world. The era of globalism is falling apart. The era of global institutions is falling apart. In some ways, that's good. These were often very undemocratic, interventionist institutions, but it also opens up a new era of unpredictability. I don't think Trump is the single-handed author of this new period, but he definitely is hurrying it along. And we know from history that trade wars and economic tension can often boil over into something else. So we do need to keep level heads, even as we're talking about serious matters like this.
Absolutely. Always so good to talk to you, Brendan. I know we're going to have hopefully we'll speak again in the next week as well, but I said in 2 weeks' time, Tuesday the 15th of April, we're going to be doing a live podcast with Spiked for your podcast at 7 o'clock, I think, live it is, on Tuesday the 15th of April. Very much looking forward to doing that with you. That's Brendan O'Neill. Benjamin Butterworth, listening to all of that, what do you want to come back in on?
Well, I think Brendan O'Neill is right that we're living in an era where the makeup of the last 70 years of global institutions is clearly changing, and Donald Trump is driving that. Whether it lasts, whether it becomes substantial, will depend probably on what happens after Donald Trump.
Or is everyone just going to sit and wait until Donald Trump's out? I mean, he's been talking about running for a third term.
Indeed, which he won't, and I suspect he doesn't.
I don't think he will.
Anyway, he can't.
He's going to be old. Well, I mean, again, this whole idea that he could run. Could he not run as vice president rather than president,
No.
and then JD Vance stands down? I don't know. I don't think it'll happen either.
No, you can only be on a presidential ticket twice. And actually, in reality, each state has to put the candidates on the ticket.
Yeah.
And so there's inevitably going to be enough states that would stop that. So even if somehow he forced it, it's never going to happen. But I think what he's doing, the question is, you just said it, is the rest of the world, or much of the world, just going to try and resist this and sit it out? That certainly looks to be the UK's attitude to this, of sort of say nothing. You know, you've got these tariffs.
Don't upset him.
Exactly, which is not a bad logic, but is it the best logic? You've got this attitude of the tariffs come in tomorrow, which could have a real effect on parts of our economy, and we're not really saying anything.
Yeah. But the extraordinary thing is, what are you going to? What is the purpose of grandstanding if it's not going to make things any better? But there's also, I mean, it's real politics. Sometimes you have to take one on the chin when there's a much bigger trading partner. But I think what's fascinating is how much damage this could do to the American economy. I don't know who put it into Donald Trump's head that tariffs were a good thing. There is an element of bringing back, onshoring again, bringing back a lot of that manufacturing that has gone, and it's all very well putting the prices going down in America because you've got all these cheap goods, but if people haven't got jobs, we need to all do that. I think I'm in favour of free trade, except where when you have completely free trade, or indeed the EU, free movement of people within a big customs union, actually some people get hurt. The rich people always get richer. Rich will always get richer, but people at the bottom of the pile get poorer from these things.
You couldn't have a more perfect storm for inflation than putting tariffs on lots of goods and the manufacturing of parts of goods, and also cutting immigration, which leads to higher wages. So that will affect
that'd be a good thing for people on their wage. But here's the thing. What's fun of it? You're a massive fan of the EU. You know, the EU has tariffs on everyone pretty much outside of the EU. People always say, it's free trade. No, the EU is about free trade within the customs union to protect from outside.
But the problem is, I mean, yes, we do, but the problem is that, the US and the West relies. The fact we've outsourced our manufacturing of day-to-day goods to places like China is one of the reasons why today a TV costs a few hundreds of pounds than it did 25 years ago. We've benefited enormously from this global model, and challenging it could make things very expensive for ordinary people.
OK, well, we shall talk about more on that. I'd love to hear from you, particularly about bills going up, these tariffs and everything. I'd love to hear from you. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. It's just coming up to 12:25. This is Talk.
The mask has slipped and will continue to slip. This charity boss, of course, also calls out Meghan as being difficult and controlling and equally bullying. But it's kind of what the likes of you and I in this station have known for, well, about 3 or 4 years, I think, isn't it? That they are as
hypocrites.
Well, they're also just not very nice people. And I think you can always tell when people aren't very nice and they put on this little act to make it look as though they're all virtuous and lovely and fluffy. We know they're not. They are not very nice individuals. The mask is slipping, yeah, good on them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:28 is the time. Lots more top guests coming up. Lots more from Benjamin Butterworth. Not that I'm not including you as a top guest, obviously, although Georgina, a caller earlier, definitely didn't think so. But let's go to your top calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Plus your messages coming in on text and on X about bills going up. It's, let's go through. It's your gas, your electricity bills going up, water bills going up, some by up to sort of 40%. Council tax going up, car tax going up, TV licence, broadband, mobile phone costs, you name it. Of course, we're seeing inflation rising. Yeah, we're not back up to 11%, but we're looking at, 3-4% rather than the 2% the Bank of England are supposed to be aiming for. Brendan, I don't think it is Brendan we just spoke to, but Brendan's got in touch to say just look at how MPs get paid. I think over 90 grand is ridiculous. Meanwhile, we all suffer. I know they would point out that their pay rise was less than inflation. But then a lot of people's are, aren't they? Gordon says, to be honest, at this rate, I might just end up moving somewhere like Vietnam. Good weather, good food and pretty cheap. John says, I guess we have Brexit to thank for this. John, we're going to have words. Sarah says, I guess we just have to keep paying our taxes and say, yes, sir, thank you, sir. And Bob says, oh, silly me, I've got to pay my BBC licence fee. Never mind. What can you do? Let's go to your calls. 0344 499 1000. Bridget is on the line. She's in Suffolk. Hello, Bridget.
Hello, Julia. Hello. I just want to have words with Benjamin because he keeps going on about baby boomers. Well, I'm going to give him, I'm a baby boomer, right? Benjamin, I get £442 pension every 2 weeks because it's only my way of being able to manage the house, right? So with that 442, I pay this week £10 rates, 123 on my new council tax. My gas and electric bills just come in, 135. My petrol's 35 a week. My car insurance is £63.89, mobile 40, and house insurance.
My maths isn't good enough to know what you're left with at the end of that.
Well,
anything?
Not nothing, Julie. Shall I tell you why? Because the people that were born in the 50s and the 60s, we worked, and I'm still working in a shop 18 hours. That helps me pay for my dentist.
Yeah.
Or a grandchild that's got a birthday due, which they don't get a lot. They get £10 voucher.
Yeah.
It's just the basics of being able to pay for dental treatment.
Yeah, you've got the basics. Here's the thing. There are the baby... It depends what we call a baby boom. I'm not quite sure. I'm thinking of my parents' generation, the people late 70s, early 80s. They kind of had it. They had the best of everything, didn't they? In terms of, even if you went to university, it was free. You probably didn't have to pay for your kids to go to university. They bought a house for sort of 20 grand that's now worth, hundreds of thousands. They got there's final salary pension schemes. I mean, you name it. So many things. And younger generations, my generation, the generation below, ending up paying for it. But Benjamin, your response to what Bridget says, she's saying, look, I'm not wealthy, don't blame me.
Well, there are two things. There are people that just get the basic state pension for whom the deal they get is poor. That's perfectly legitimate. The problem is that there are a huge number of retirees that have benefited enormously and disproportionately from the system in a way that their grandkids certainly can't. And they are taking so much money, which is unjustified. And the problem isn't that you didn't work hard. That would be a ridiculous thing to say. The problem is that working hard today gets a much smaller return. In 1970, the average income was the same as the average house price. Today, the average house is 12 times the average income.
You just can't. You can work the same hours and you work just as hard and you don't get as much for it. What do you say to that, Bridget?
Well, what I'm going to say is that these people, the younger generation, they are, some of them are work shy.
Oh, absolutely.
You heard that right. And we worked. When I brought my kids up on my own, 3 daughters, I had to pay the mortgage. I had 4 jobs. And it was like spinning plates, trying to pay this. I used to have to work out. And it just infuriates me that, you know, and also the ones that are the baby boomers, they'll be leaving their grandchildren some of that money so they can get on. You know, you just got to think of it. And I'm fed up with the houses that are being built because they're not going to be paid and being built for the people that live in this country. We know who's going to be getting those houses.
But yeah, and even the number, even if it wasn't them getting it, the number that are being built don't account for the extra number of people who've been coming in. Bridget's got a fair point there, Benjamin.
Well, I mean, the fact is that if somebody was trying to do exactly what Bridget did today on a normal salary job, 3 kids, they would barely be able to afford rent, let alone owning a house. And so the gripe isn't to say people didn't work hard, it's to say that the social contract, that if you work hard,
if I do my bit, I should be able to make a future for me and my family.
It's been broken. And so
build more houses. It's the cry of the show. It's our motto, build more houses. And again, there are a lot of people who own a home who then go, oh, I don't want a home built there. I've got a lovely view of the fields. And it's like, yeah, well, I mean, when your house was built, someone else would have had a lovely view of the fields as well. Bridget, thank you so much for your call. Really appreciate that. You're having a whole one today, Benjamin. This is very good fun for me. Jason is in Wiltshire. Hello, Jason. What do you want to say?
Hiya, Julia, you're right.
Yes, what do you want to tell us?
It was with referring on to the, I'm going to call her the angry lady from earlier, who I can see was angry with the pensioner thing.
Yeah.
Old Benjamin was saying, obviously, they're better off, you know, than what they were previous. You've took their winter fuel payments away from them. You've hyperinflated.
Well, to be fair, he didn't do it. I mean, he supports Labour, but he's not in the government. Let's not blame him for everything.
Yeah. OK, yeah, or should we say Labour have? So they took the winter fuel allowance away. They've hyperinflated all our energy, so that's all gone up through the roof. So how can they be better off? And when you look previous years for pension increases, they've had bigger increases over the previous years than what they're getting this year.
OK, Benjamin?
Well, let me tell you, Jason, in the last 15 years, the sector of British generations that's had the biggest increase in their wealth, it's people that are pensioners.
This is true.
Pensioners own £500 billion of buy-to-let property, which is being rented by young people that can barely afford the bills.
And they're more likely to own their own homes. But here's the thing, and I'm sure Jason would agree with this, this is the issue. There are something like a third of pensioners are doing just fine. They're sort of, you know, I've got to be, my parents and all their friends are doing just fine. They do know, went to university.
I know your mother, she was the family doctor, Julia.
Really?
So we know Dr. Hartley-Brewer.
Was she any good?
Yeah. Everybody was scared of her.
Oh, quite right. I don't know where I get it from.
It was put up in Suffolk with Mrs. Hartley-Brewer.
I love it. I can't wait to tell her this.
Prisoners.
Yeah, exactly. Well, she was the one who wouldn't sign people off sick and things like that, doing everyone a service.
No, she wouldn't do it. No, that's what I'm saying. No, she wouldn't do it.
Exactly. But this, I cannot. This has been the best fun show. Yeah. What can I say? But Jason, he's still alive. That's the important thing. He's still alive. My mum was his doctor. But this thing, some people of that generation did well, but an awful lot of other people didn't, and we kind of put everyone in the same boat. Oh well, they're all living the life of Riley. They're on their Saga cruise, owning their buy-to-let property. No, there are millions of elderly people who are really having to make ends meet, aren't there?
Yeah, and like you said, we see them. I expect you see them around Bath. I mean, where you come from, but every area of life you see it, and you know they're struggling. They've got a state pension. That's all they've got. They have nothing else. Yep. And Ted, when you take a heating allowance away from them, but then you go and pay for a load of immigrants to stay in a hotel.
People are resentful. Really. Absolutely. Jason, thank you for that. Just a quick word from Benjamin.
And yet, the many wealthy pensioners, and pensioner poverty is a fraction of what it was 20 years ago when winter fuel allowance was introduced. Many of the wealthier pensioners, why weren't they saying, no, I'm happy to give up my £200 to £300 winter bonus to help those poorer ones? They don't say that, do they?
Well, no, but to be fair, also, they're being taxed on their income. So wealthy pensioners are still being taxed, and they will have paid a lot of taxes to be in that position to where they've been. But I mean, let's not pretend that it just happened. Someone didn't just suddenly go, oh, here you are, go and be well off.
It is morally and economically wrong to take 200 quid from someone on minimum wage working full time.
They're not taking it from people
on
minimum
minimum
wage.
Well, they are, because that's how tax works.
No, they're not.
They take it from it and they give it...
People on minimum wage are not next contributors.
They take it from someone on a low income and they give it to a 70-year-old in £1 million house, and it's not a winter fuel allowance. It's £200 you could do what you like with, or £300 if you're a bit older. It is totally wrong.
I do know someone who heats their swimming pool with it. I'm not going to lie.
You shouldn't get money just because you're 67 to pay your bills.
I need to do a competition read. This has been great fun. Anyway, Mum, can't wait to tell you this story. Anyway, time now to find out how you could be in with the chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley this summer and £10,000. That'll help with your winter fuel bill.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Well, good luck with that competition. 12:38 is the time. I'm next going to talk to Stephen Wolfe about how Keir Starmer has done really well in smashing the boats, which is why we've got more Channel migrants than ever before. Well done, Prime Minister. That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk, the home of common sense. 12:40 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benjamin Butterworth said he's getting a right old posting from you. Keep it going, kids. It's been lots of fun. Let's talk right now about Keir Starmer delivering record Channel migrant crossings. Well done, despite, of course, smashing the gangs as he promised to do. Let's talk to Stephen Wolfe about that, former MEP, Director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Very, very good afternoon to you, Stephen.
Very good afternoon.
So talk us through, what is the latest record achievement of the Prime Minister?
OK, so published on our site on the end of 31st of March, 6,543 illegal migrants arrived in the UK in small boats. That's a 33% increase on last year, which means that we're heading towards 80,000 arriving this year.
Oh, well done, Prime Minister. That's, I mean, what an achievement.
I tell you what, he's got our thumbs up at that committee to turn around and saying, I'm doing better than all the other prime ministers before in bringing people in. And look at the numbers, though, Julie. Look, Benjamin's talking about numbers. £327 million is what we're going to spend just on this cohort in 1 year alone. Now, if you want to give, £25,000 to those people looking for a home, that money could go to at least 13 to 14,000 couples to be able to get them on a starter home.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, and it's amazing how often it comes up in our calls, how angry and resentful people are when they are struggling themselves, but someone can arrive here and then they get given a hotel, then they get, given benefits. Okay, it's a small amount, but at some point we know these people, they're never going to be shipped home. That's why they keep on coming, and they are going to basically get given leave to stay, at which point they're going to be eligible for homes in this country, competing with everybody else and be given benefits. We know that's what's going to happen. They know that's what's going to happen. Everyone knows, apart from the government that keeps denying it's happening. But this is the thing, isn't it? Is that it's untenable to carry on like this. Every country in Europe knows. That's why we've seen the growth of what they call the far right, what more sensible people call the hard right, people, well, I would say moderate centre right, with people saying this doesn't work anymore. We're not prepared to put up with it anymore. But what is actually being done about it? Because we've had this woman, the second day of this big international conference to tackle, the organised criminal element of smuggling. I don't believe for a nanosecond it's going to make any difference to the number of people who get on small dinghies. Do you?
I don't believe in the short term or even the medium term it's going to be. As I say, looking at those numbers, the people smugglers have made about £43 million just in 3 months to get their clients over here. And as you quite rightly say, there is no deterrent, because coming over here, you're likely to stay. And I find it laughable that these numbers, about 20,000 returnees that we're looking at from Keir Starmer. I've applied so many times for freedom of information on actually how many of them are related to those coming across on Channel boats. And what it looks like, it's mainly those who are overstayers on visas who are volunteering to return. So he's failing on that front.
Yeah.
What will happen, Julia, is I think it'll be a talking shop. I think there'll be more demands for money from France to ourselves. We've already paid $2 billion. And I think genuinely we won't achieve a great deal, because the biggest deterrent of all of Europe knows, is that you have to close the borders and return people to those countries.
Yeah, it is just that simple. And again, you can arrest every single person involved with smuggling right now, put them away for 20 years. Someone else will appear the next day. The price will go up, but eventually it'll come down again. There'll be enough competition. The economic rules apply just as much to this business model as they do to every other business, don't they? Again, I don't think many people are seeing there's any likelihood of this happening, but we've also had the latest cases. I mean, again, so many of these cases where we do attempt to extradite them, and what a surprise we can't. Latest case, I mean, there's one a week now, isn't it? One a day sometimes. Zilmul Khan, 25-year-old, arrested in Britain last year, fighting extradition. He's an Afghan accused of smuggling thousands of migrants in the UK. He shouldn't be extradited to Belgium, a court heard, because there are mosquitoes in the Belgian prisons. I mean, they're having a laugh, aren't they?
I know we're laughing here, but we shouldn't laugh, because what we really are is laughing at the failings of our government to be able to understand the European Court of Human Rights.
Yeah.
We've discussed this on the channel many times. Article 8 does not prevent people that we regard as a danger to our country to be returned. In Belgium, this man was convicted in absentia, so therefore he is a convicted individual, and so he should be returned. What it means, he's not going to live in Scotland because of the moggies up in Scotland.
Yeah.
He can't live in certain parts of Wales for the same reason. Yeah. No, this is laughable.
I mean, I've been in Antigua, and it's very lovely, but you do get the odd bug. I mean, maybe you wouldn't want to go there either. I mean, it's just... But they are making a mockery of us. And we saw this in the Sun today as well. Migrants, I think Albanians, filmed boasting about coming over here, boasting about the hotel and the flat screen telly and the benefits they get, and we're paying those bills. They're open, they're blatant about it, saying, hey, basically advertising. Look, come on in. This is a system. We're not going to be sent home. They know better than the politicians how the system works.
They absolutely do, and not only when it comes down to how they get over here. They're encouraged by lots of non-governmental organisations who are provided with multi-million pounds in grants from local authorities and from the government itself to be able to advise them on the benefits and how to stay.
Yeah.
It's a virtuous circle for the people smugglers' business model and a virtuous circle for anyone who wants to get those into the black economy.
Absolutely.
Which is growing.
Can I just ask you, just finally, you were an MEP in European Parliament for a party very much opposed to the European Parliament, campaigning for Brexit. What did you make of the conviction of Marine Le Pen for embezzlement of EU funds to be used basically for National Rally staff back in France? I mean, I think that the conviction charge is bang to rights, but the question of whether the decision to, the punishment, stopping her standards in elections, and whether the decision to prosecute her and dozens of her party officials, and not perhaps many of the other people also doing something very similar in the European Parliament, was a political decision. When you were there, I remember there were lots of scandals being exposed by people like you and, Nigel Farage and others about the outrageous, corruption and fraud and massive amounts of money that were just swilling around the European Commission and the European Union. What do you make of it all?
Well, I think it's a political decapitation of Marine Le Pen, and completely unfair to utilise the system that they've got in place to apply for a way that she cannot even campaign or stand in the next election until her appeal is over. So we know it's all about politics. In France, we had Sarkozy. He was convicted but was allowed to stand. We also know that the head of the World Bank, she was, I forgot the French lady at the name.
She was Lagarde, Christine Lagarde.
Lagarde, £500 million kind of fraud event, and she was allowed to continue. So this is particularly aimed at her, and it's not fairly applied. And I think that's the first principle why people are angry. But when I was in the European Parliament, we only ever saw those parties of the right being challenged on these issues when we knew for a fact, looking across at our other political parties and the socialists, the Greens, the German conservative parties, they were all doing exactly the same, and yet they were never challenged. And that is why it's disgraceful to actually claim that this is about democracy. It is about political decapitation, and entirely unfair.
Stephen Wolfe, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk about the absurdity of an Oxford University historian claiming that homophobia is actually a creation of the British Empire. It's all our fault. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
What the extent of, unless you have free speech, you can't have free trade is. I don't think any of us quite know what's going on right now behind the scenes, but I think we really rather blown it with America, I'm afraid. I do think if these tariffs are slapped on with everybody, I do think we have an opportunity to be the first country to get out of them, for the obvious reasons that our trade with America is roughly in balance. And hey, you know what? They are the biggest foreign investor in Britain, and we're the biggest foreign investor in America. So we've got lots of mutual interest. It's bad news, but we can get out of it.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. 12:52 is the time. Still be joined by Benjamin Butterworth in just a couple of moments. David Bull will be here standing in for Ian Collins all this week. Tell us what's happening on his show from the afternoon. First up, though, just in case you were wondering, I found something else that's our fault in the papers today. I thought it was an April Fool. Apparently it's not. I mean, these sort of stories should be April Fools. But apparently, according to a leading historian, an emeritus professor at Oxford University, Dermot McCulloch, no less, Muslims learnt homophobia from the British Empire and said a horror of same-sex relationships, his words, did not exist in Islamic culture before the 19th century. It was only when the British Empire expanded across the Muslim world, he claims, that Islam absorbed homophobia from British colonial armies. Of course, one of the things we have seen in recent years, that polling of people of different ethnic minorities and different religious minorities, is that among many mainstream Muslims in this country, their views on homosexuality are kind of in the same territory as people's views, the mainstream community's views back in 1950. Very different from the views of the majority of people in this country. But it's our fault, apparently. Well, let's talk about this with religious commentator Myron Senthil-Nathan, who joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Myron.
Good afternoon, Julia. Good to be with you.
I'm wondering if there is anything that isn't the fault of the British Empire, although no one seems to ever remember the good things we did, like, I don't know, Industrial Revolution and things like that. But, I mean, he's an emeritus professor at Oxford University, probably knows more about these things certainly than I do. But did we export homophobia? Is it a Western creation?
No, I mean, we've seen activist judges in play when it comes to these immigration cases, and these are activist academics that we're seeing now. And I think what the professor's done is he's stumbled across some Arab poets who have been talking about sort of same-sex relationships and romanticising that, and then he's made a huge leap to say this is what Islam was before the colonial period. And if we look at the Quran, and there is a verse, particularly in chapter 7, which talks about condemning homosexuality. We have the Hadith, which sayings from the Prophet, which condemn homosexuality. There are numerous scholars stretching from the medieval time to date now, which condemn homosexuality.
As there are in pretty much every religious text for pretty much every religion.
Exactly.
This was the norm in most societies, and still is the norm in many societies around the world. I mean, certainly, even in our country, until not that long ago.
Yeah, and I think what this professor thinks is he thinks that he's somehow saving the Muslim community from the stigma of homophobia. But I don't think he has his finger on the pulse. I think if you were to, I'm speculating, but I think if you could ask most Muslims, they would be appalled at what this professor is proposing. They are quite traditional. Most Muslims are quite traditional and they're quite conservative. And they believe that it is the right thing. And it is mandated by their religion that to engage in same-sex relationships is actually wrong. So they would disagree with this professor. And he thinks he's being their saviour, but I don't think they want a saviour.
Yeah, it is absolutely fascinating when we see certainly in the woke left this hierarchy of victims and of values and things, when they do clash. And if you're going to sort of put, Muslims must be in this category, or brown people who may have been Muslim based must be in this category. But obviously we champion gay rights as part of being a liberal democracy. And when those two things clash, well, who do we blame then, and who's at fault then? Instead of accepting that, I feel very strongly about gay people having equal rights with straight people, but I also completely, and I'm also an atheist, but I'm also happy to accept that people may have different views and are entitled to them for whether religious or any other reason.
Yeah, I think in your earlier part, you hit an nail on the head. I think what's happening is we're racializing religion. So Islam has become synonymous with the brown person. Christianity has become synonymous with the white person. And what we see in the mindset of some of these academics that we're discussing is that the brown person is inherently right and pure. And if there's any kind of toxicity or awkwardness in the brown person, it must have come from the white person. So therefore, it has been implanted in them by the colonial British Empire into Islam. It's not actually in Islam itself.
It's very patronising, isn't it? It really is extraordinarily patronising, especially as this is a cultural thing pretty much across the world from all cultures. What do you think? I mean, why do you think people... I mean, he's obviously a clever bloke. You're not an emeritus professor at one of the top universities in the world. And why do you think he's claiming this?
I don't know, Julia. I've often wondered the same thing. I've been reflecting on it for a long, long time, especially like I said, when you see these ECHR cases and these activist judges, you see Lord Hermer and so on, you know, selling off the Chagall silence. What is it in the mindset that they hate this country so much, they wish its destruction? Yeah. I don't understand that psychology. I've been pondering it a long time. I just don't get it.
No, I don't either. I can't make sense of it. Myron, Sentinel Nathan, religious commentator, thank you so much for joining. Very much appreciate that. Benjamin Butterworth, what do you make of this claim?
Well, there's no doubt that Britain exported homophobia. 35 Commonwealth countries still have it criminalised. India only...
Well, they could have stopped it. Wait a minute. Those countries have all been... they've all perfectly happily been independent nations since, 1950. They've chosen not to change the law, and that's our fault.
Well, only a couple of years ago, India removed the colonial-era law, making it illegal to be gay in that country.
Well, they had a choice all that time. They chose not. Why? You think everyone, every society was completely, very, very, very much at ease with people being gay before then, really?
But well, the evidence would say yes, it wasn't on the radar. But
wasn't on.
No, there are because
they're living in cloud cuckoo land.
I'm not. I'm living in reality, and the fact is that in social issues, it's very hard to change people's attitudes. It happens slowly. And
well, except it didn't in this country. Actually, look about gay marriage. That was something that was almost revolutionary. By the way, it was David Cameron brought in. That was a massive change in people's views on that within about a decade. That's very fast.
Look, what I will say is
I'm very pleased that there was that change.
I have travelled to lots of countries which still have the death penalty for being gay, and they're Muslim countries. And I tell you, no one has ever said there it was the British. They always cite the Quran.
Funny that, isn't it funny? Yeah, exactly. Joining us talking about this is David Bull. Your face was a picture.
Well, I mean, look, it's always our fault, isn't it? It doesn't matter what it is. It's always our fault. Well, I blame me most of the time, actually. But I read that this morning and I just thought, what a load of absolute twaddle.
God, he's gone for twaddle. There's so many other words.
Well, that's a good word.
But this is the thing. But I do want. It's the motivation of these people that I'm always fascinated by.
Well, of course, it was an academic